All right, y'all. Welcome to All Politics and Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics and Local, particularly if y'all know it's 6 o'clock and it's Friday. But more importantly, if it is the fourth Friday, y'all know it's time for the Disciples. So they're going to be coming up this evening at 6 o'clock. They're going to be first. And then, of course, they're going to have a guest with them. They're going to have the incomparable Bob Fayemi Shakur is going to be up, and we're going to talk with her about what's going on in the arts community, and particularly the restoration for Symphony Hall. So we're going to talk with her along with the disciples. And what's up after that, brother Zaid?
At 7 o'clock, we're going to have a special segment on Cuba. July 26th, just a couple of days ago, was the 70th anniversary of the launch of the Cuban Revolution. We're going to have a special event at the Shabazz Center this Saturday evening, and I'll have Ike Nahem, one of the organizers of the event, and maybe some other surprise guests join us for that segment. 7:45, mentioning the Shabazz Center. The Shabazz Center was hot this past Monday because there was a press conference about a new witness coming forward and a renewed call to have the investigation of Malcolm's assassination reinvestigated for the express benefit of the Shabazz family. I'll have her Boyd and Zak Kondo, two very important folks in documenting the legacy of Malcolm X and Zak, and especially around Malcolm's assassination. Zak has given us the definitive book on the assassination, Conspiracies Unveiling the Assassination of Malcolm X. And then, of course, we'll wind up after that with DJ Rhino on all things happening in the land of hip hop.
Yep. So sounds like it's going to be a real
Yes, sir.
eventful show tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to that, and definitely looking forward to sister when she come on, so that we can have a conversation with sister. Do you know Fayemi Shakur?
Family, I've known her for decades, and she was quite young. She was
Wow,
actually in my troops for a minute in the party. Right?
wow.
Yes, and I did one of her son's naming ceremony with Sister Zul
Okay,
many years ago when her children were babies.
okay.
So yes. It's been a pleasure to watch Fayemi grow to become the resource that she has become. Absolutely.
Well, that's good. So that should be a really great conversation when we get into that with her tonight. So what's going on in the news, Zaid, as we hold it on, wait for some of the disciples to jump on.
Well, you name where you want to begin.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think one of the things I'm hearing is that Santos is getting more and more ridiculous
Uh,
as he was comparing uh, basketball players to baseball players, and somehow he said baseball was more American, and basketball players are these freaks of nature. And so he was really saying code wise. He was
oh,
saying because they're black.
baseball is the white game,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And basketball is the game for let me make it plain, the game for niggas.
Exactly.
And then niggas got all this other stuff going on. They're the bucks. You
Yeah,
know, football has become that quiet as it's kept because the NFL has more black athletes than it's had in a long time. But more dangerous than that is that he is still amping up this attack on Africana studies.
right.
Right? In fact, our friends and comrades from the People's Organization for Progress are going to use their Justice Monday to address this latest thing. Slavery was good for us because it gave us skills.
Right. Right. Right.
Slavery ain't never been good for us,
Right. Right.
right? But they
Right.
want that to be the letter of how history is taught in Florida, and then if that sucker ever really takes the national stage,
Right.
right, which is really what he's trying to do. He's trying to get national attention, playing to the base, the racist base of the right wing, to out Trump, hoping that Trump gets dumped by the state because he's got a fresh take on there's a fresh wave of indictment on his behind to move his own stakes up and to push this whole thing to the right with this whole fascist orientation of these backwards folks coming out of Florida. So we could talk about his behind all day.
Yeah. Well, right. I think that one of the things that we've got to point out, though, because he is, from everything I'm hearing, he is the front runner at this point. And it seems like, what's causing him to stay there is that the more outlandish attacks he make on Black people, it seems like the more and more the racist white community, particularly, the majority of those folks who supported Trump, continue to support him. I mean, which is absolutely insane. And what's interesting is that he says all of this, Saeed, with a straight face.
Oh yeah.
I mean, which is incredible. I mean, when I watched the interview, I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, wow, is this theater or is this really who this guy is?
Is who he really is, and it's who a whole lot of this country really is. Remember, Mr. Biden just won that election to stop Trump by just a margin, a slender margin.
Right.
Meaning that there's a whole sea of folks who look like DeSantis and Trump, who believe all of that mess, and who are willing to engage in behavior that is lawful and unlawful, right, to advance that agenda. And both, and a whole lot of folks are playing for a win. So the kind of mess that Trump and others are being held modestly accountable for, like January 6th, that they'll be cleared.
Right. Exactly.
That they'll be cleared. And with that, knowing that they'll be cleared, there'll be an increase of attacks like we saw on January 6th. And we need to be clear about it. This is the overthrow of the second Reconstruction in full gear.
Right. 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 What's interesting is that, anyone else running in a campaign would be somewhat skeptical about offending folks on the other side. It seemed like to me,
they don't care.
This guy wants to offend people.
They don't care.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things. Let me just, I mean, what's interesting is I can't wait to see this debate, because I mean, if there's anybody who knows any of the inside story, particularly about Trump, is going to be Christie, right? Because he used to be part of that campaign. So he's going to know a lot of that whole intricate parts of what went on and all of that. But I think Santos, I think, and let me ask you a question: is this guy Latino?
Italian.
He's an Italian. Okay. Because I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, man. Just some of the stuff you hear coming out of his mouth, and it's like I can't even call it theater, man. And I don't even know if I really want to respond to it. I think that I just recognize it is what it is, man. You know what I mean?
The response is organization.
Yeah,
organization, mass mobilization, and organization in defense of the ballot. We have to win. We have to halt. This is a mirror in my head now. We have to halt the advance of the right wing.
Right.
We have to do that. Right. The implications of us not doing that can be quite dangerous. I don't think most of us believed. Right. Yeah.
I canceled your hair appointment. I'm trying.
Reverend Roundtree coming in loud and proud.
Right.
I don't think any of us believe. I can remember when Roe v. Wade was passed.
Right.
That was passed in a way where folks felt that was an all-time kind of thing. When the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed, that would folks believe that was like an all-time kind of victory.
Right.
We are in the moment.
Right.
Where that is no longer true.
Right.
Women no longer have the right to choose without a whole lot of fight for their own very freedom. Right. And the attack on the ballot for our folks is as real as all get out. and it will get more violent if we lose any more ground. We need to be real clear about that. There's a great film out that's on PBS that looks at how young people were trained going into what was Freedom Summer of 1964, right? We need a redo of Freedom Summer of 64, but redone based on where we need to go at this particular moment to ensure that we back their behinds up and beat their behinds at the poll and do whatever was necessary to reclaim that benchmark of our rights that we thought were once going to be untouchable.
But let me ask you this, though, Zaid. Do you think that our community is fired up enough to really understand what's at stake in 2024? I mean, do you?
I want to always, and this is we go from Amiri in my head to Kwame in my head, right? I have to always believe in our beloved sister has just joined in and she's coming in ready to go. And I'm gonna wind up my remarks and let her in, right? But I have to always believe that we can win, and I want to believe in our young folks coming up with what they need to do to help us figure it out. Just remember, 2 years ago we had the largest protest summer in the history of this country from our young people, and those mobilizations weren't just black; they were black, brown, and white. Right. That wide base has to be re-energized and reorganized in a way that is made a difference. There's this whole movement in the South called Soul to the Polls. A lot of young folks are up in that fight against police brutality. This fight against Cop City in Georgia, even though there's backwards elected officials in the way going along with that, the mobilization and the organization to resist that is wide, strong, and proud. So I have to believe that I don't fight on the face that I'm on the notion that I'm going to lose, right? Even if I do,
right,
right. And we both ex-fighters, right? I've done a whole lot of fighting. I have lost, but you fight win.
Yeah. Oh, for real. Yeah.
So I have
well,
to
listen, we definitely want to jump into that conversation a little bit later too, Zaid, to go a little deeper into that, because we've got to begin to start talking about that and waking up, particularly the electorate amongst our people, so that they can understand what's at stake in 2024. But let's introduce our sister. She is 1/3, of course, of the mighty disciples. She's holding the line for them today. So we want to welcome our sister, the Reverend Louise Scott-Rountree, who is, of course, one of the outstanding councilwomen at large in our city. So welcome, Councilwoman.
Peace. Good evening, Mr. Ed Riley, Esquire, and Baba Zaid Muhammad. It is an honor once again on this fourth Friday to be on All Politics Are Local, America's #1 hip-hop political radio talk show. Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited because one thing is for certain and two things are for sure. We're going to tell you the truth. We're not going to sugarcoat it. When you mess around with us, listen, you're going to hear some things you might not want to hear, but at least we know we said it. So if you don't want to take heed to it, it's not because we didn't tell you about you need to vote, you need to wake up, you need to be aware of all of the things that are going on in your community. And watch this. If you're not taking care of your home, what's going on in the community will be affected by that. So listen, good evening. I'm missing my brother, Pastor Bryant Ali, who we are praying for, who's the London weather, and our Minister Haqq Muhammad, who spearheads the disciples, is traveling. I know he's going to be sitting with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan real soon, but I miss my brothers. But how many know that if you want something said, send a man, but if you need something done, send a woman? Well, she's here today. God bless you.
Wait a minute. Let me do this though, Roger. This is real important. Our brother now, Pastor has been in the hospital for a minute, but you actually got to go see him a minute ago. I just texted him a little while ago.
I went to see him yesterday, and he walked me to the elevator and took a selfie. So you know he's good. He's good. He's good. Listen, Dr. Ali has had so many challenges, but you know what's amazing? that God allowed him to stand on all those corners, to speak all that truth, to speak all that life. He said, and he's sort of feeling somewhat like our honorable mayor. Like, we done all of this. Haven't y'all watched us long enough to learn something, to get out there and do it yourself? Where are we? I'm just saying, like, we can't expect people. We worry about passing the torch to the youth. Some don't want to let go. Some have let go, but nobody has grabbed it. Nobody, it's almost like they feel lost if the mayor's not there. They know that they can't speak like him, but you got to create your own narrative and create your own voice and use your. I am not my mother or my father, Director Shakur. I am who I am. But growing up, I was Reverend Louise daughter, Madam Scott's daughter. I am so thankful that God finally gave Louise her own identity. But you have to work towards it. It just don't fall on you. Everybody know I'm Team Baraka, but they also know I'm Reverend Rountree, Louise Scott-Rountree. Y'all gave me this name, Revolutionary Reverend Rountree. So I'm all of that wrapped in one. I know who I am on top of all of that. And what's most important, I know whose I am. We can help people identify their calling. We can have some more bullhorns and some more Baba Zaids, but they won't be Baba Zaid number 2. They'll be whoever they are, number 1, standing on the shoulders of which you've already laid out. There you go. Okay.
So let me do the introduction.
Come on in there, nice one. Go ahead.
Such a sweetheart.
So let me do the introduction, of course, for our guest tonight. Of course, I should say the guest for the disciples. Let me just go ahead and read a little bit of her bio so that folks know who she is. In fact, she's never been on the show. I don't think you've ever been before. I don't think so.
No, I haven't.
Amazing.
I know, it's amazing, right? We've been here 16 years, Zaid, and you never invited on the show.
Well, I ain't been here 16 years. Y'all been here.
Well, y'all been here 16, but you know what's crazy? Director Shakur.
But Rountree been here. Rountree, you've been here at least almost 10.
Yeah, that's true. If it's 10, we're gonna do a 10th anniversary special. We're gonna do. All right, let me go ahead and introduce this beautiful woman.
So let's get through this. Okay, so let me just say, Fayemi Shakur,
beautiful queen,
serves as the Arts and Cultural Affairs Director for the City of Newark. Since joining the Honorable Mayor Ras J. Baraka's administration in January 2020, Ms. Shakur has developed the City of Newark's Creative Catalyst Fund, providing funding support to individual artists and small to mid-sized arts organizations. She also oversees the city's public arts program, creating opportunities for neighborhood revitalization and arts-based community engagement. As a writer and cultural critic, her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN Style, and MFON, Women Photographers in the African Diaspora, among other books and publications. In 2019, she founded A Womb of Violence, a project-based collective that celebrates the work of Black women, writers, poets, and artists with over 20 years of experience in arts administration. Her career emphasizes collaboration, cultural organizing, and community engagement as essential and meaningful experiences that challenges the way we see the world, ourselves, and each other. Welcome to the show, Sister Shakur.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
It is our pleasure. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rountree. I mean, I've got a lot of questions I want to ask, but of course, it is your show. I'll follow your lead.
So we all know, and what is an honor to have Fayemi. She's really not an upfront individual. I met her. She is the power behind the throne, and when I say throne, there's much work in the arts community, and we're just blessed to have Fayemi as part of the team here in the city of Newark. When you put creativity, when you put the arts, when you put all of these things That means that we're demonstrating the gifts that individuals have, whether it be a painting, whether it be an instrument, whether it be a street painting. We know that she spearheaded the Black Lives Matter movement of painting on Martin Luther King Boulevard. There's so many things, all the beautiful murals you see. But what I don't want to do is talk about this woman that agreed, this queen that agreed to come on this show, because this is really, I'm telling you, Brother Ed, this is a blessing. This is epic to have her come on and be upfront and personal. She will get on the radio. She will talk behind the scenes. She will stand in the back of a room, help you put a whole production together, and never get on the microphone.
Wow.
You have, I mean, this is who she is.
Wow.
She's been through some things throughout her life, but who hasn't? But some of the things that she's encountered, and still through the arts found her, this is it. She already knew her purpose. She already knew the plans. And there have been many plans in her life, but she had to pursue some plans, find some more purpose through some pain that she experienced. And she is pushing her way through all of that. So we are grateful that you are here, Director Shakur. And through it all, we have been with you. We love you, and we're excited to introduce you to talk about not just the current work, but some of the things that you've already accomplished here in the city of Newark and what's to come. There's this big article about Symphony Hall. So we'll get to that, but let's just talk a little bit about who you are, how you came to fall in love with the arts and do all that you do for the arts and the community of artists.
Oh, you're so kind, Reverend Roundtree. I love you too. I love our village. I have a beautiful village. I'm grateful for it every day. I don't know, how other people get through pain and adversity without having what I have behind me. So I'm so grateful. And I'm a student of Baba Zaid's, so
Yeah, you told me. Yeah.
a lot of the work that I do now, we go so far back. He did the naming ceremony for my son. I attended political education workshops where, was really politicized by a lot of the work that Baba Zaid did in, the 90s with young people, and, was really blessed to learn from him and, other elders and mentors that have kind of guided me to understand the importance of art and culture and cultural work, including Amamu Amiri Baraka, who, I love to sit at his feet and just listen to him and read his essays and, hear his perspective on everything from art to music to politics. So I've been here in the city now for over 20 years. And I started out as a journalist and an organizer. But, I really didn't learn as much as I wanted to in college, as much as I did attending, I think, community meetings and protests and rallies. Back in the day, there was African Echoes. And I remember I used to go to those lectures all the time. And those kind of things in the community are really what helped shape my understanding of being engaged in community.
So, Fayemi, we talk about Imamu Amiri Baraka, Amina Baraka, and the awareness. Some of where you are today in your love for the arts, as you stated, began sitting at their feet. What is so important, and I was going to say this towards the end, like if you had to tell young people or give them a word of advice in regards to, and I'm going to move this up, in regards to, or just the listening audience, if you had to speak to them about the arts community and the direction that they're trying to go in. I have people that send me emails saying they want to paint a mural, and I direct them to your office. Everybody that's an artist, people have to identify their assignment. Some people think they can sing; they sound good in the shower, but when it comes to singing in front of a group of people, that gift really was not bestowed upon them. It just sounds good to them. Well, it's same in the arts community. The only difference is that when you're spinning or when you're painting, or you can create something out of nothing if it's a gift that has been bestowed upon you. What advice do you have for young people that are entering into, let's just deal with the artistry?
Hmm. I would say collaborate and enter the spaces where you may be intimidated to enter them, but go to the poetry readings and the open mics. Go to the arts events. And if you don't know that they're happening, we have an organization, Newark Arts. We have community calendars that are being developed through the new Arts and Education District website. Find out what cultural events are happening in your community and go and meet people and introduce yourself. Go to the library, go to the museum. We have beautiful cultural institutions in our city that are doing amazing work, but you have to be engaged to know what's happening in your community and to meet other like minded people. Um, so I'd say that number one is make sure you're coming out and don't be shy, to introduce yourself and to share your art and what your interests are. You never know what opportunities may be out there. There are always all types of grants, all types of free programming to help you with your writing, everything from writing to photography to so many services. We have a beautiful arts community that I'm, really honored to serve. And I think, that's one of the reasons why the mayor invited me to join the administration is because of my connection and understanding with our art sector, not just the artists, but also the importance of our institutions, the importance of culture and how it can improve our quality of life, but also our understanding of ourselves. I think I was really inspired, in college by the Black arts movement and Black is Beautiful. And that campaign was so influential and so important to our people. I really understand now when we do our work how important representation is and how important it is for people to be able to see themselves in the art around them. And that was one of the reasons why I was so excited to work on the Harriet Tubman Monument Project. Um, when the mayor, you know, told me about that, I just felt so fortunate to have a mayor who really understands, who I don't have to plead with the mayor to do anything.
That's
He
right.
I'm in harmony and alignment with, his vision, and I understand what's happening across the country. I feel really fortunate because to be here in this city right now, because I wouldn't be able to do this type of work anywhere else.
Not
And
with the
I
freedom.
really don't take that for granted.
Not with the
What
freedom,
about
because what's really a blessing, director, is that um, to be able to work in the administration of a person who is so well rounded, and arts is a big part of his life. That is an amazing position and place and space to be in. A lot of leaders are just specific focus. Like I'm specifically focused on this, or I'm specifically focused on that. But the blessing in Mayor Baraka is that he can be focused on many things at the same time, but have a person like Director Fayemi Shakur that he can entrust to handle the arts element of this administration. And that's really a blessing because you were born for this. And what's amazing is that you identified at a very early age with what it is that you wanted to do, what position you wanted to play. Not that you just wanted to be an artist or sit at the feet of one of the greatest poets of all time. And now at some point, who knew, and I'm sure you did not know, and they say God is the best of planners. I'm sure you had no idea that at your age you'd be working for the son of Amina and Amiri Baraka. I like to say working with, but I'm sure in your wildest imagination that you would have the freedom to create and come with an idea. And one thing about Amiri Baraka is if you come with a good idea or a great idea, He doesn't take ownership and say it was his. He is one of the leaders, and this is so key, that realizes that if you do something great that's going to benefit the city, he's already won. It makes the whole city, it makes all of us. Too many individuals are so busy trying to worry about who's going to get the credit that something great normally slips through the cracks under other leadership because they're like, well, I didn't come up with it. So they won't say that. They'll just say, no, I don't think we should do that. But that's not him. So you've had the freedom to do. Let's just start with you. We're not going to start with Harriet Tubman because there was some things that you did prior to Harriet Tubman. Can you speak to a couple of those things?
Well, yeah, and you're right. I never imagined I'd be working or have this title. Somebody said to me not too long ago, "How do you even get a job like that?" And I was like, "That's a good question." The it just kind of happened. I saw the mayor one day and he said, "Come to my office. I need to talk to you." I didn't apply for it, but it definitely was. Our arts and culture is a part of my passion, as well as writing and cultural organizing work. So I'm not surprised that each step from the beginning, from college to the next step as a community organizer, activist, every step leads to the next steps. And so you never know, where the path is going to take you, but you have to be open to it. But prior to doing the Tubman Monument project, the mayor told me that he wanted to develop an arts fund. And I took that and ran with it. He
That
said,
did the City of Newark's Creative Catalyst Fund. Let's be clear. It has a
yeah,
name.
yes, the Creative Catalyst Fund. We never had anything like this before. And our arts community was really suffering. We had lost two major and important galleries here in our city, and funding for the arts is limited. And it's not always a thing that's, a priority on the totem pole. But, we have a mayor who is an artist, so he understands, that it is important to fire up the imaginations of our children and use the arts to create vibrancy in our neighborhoods. We don't want the city to become, gentrified like we've seen, in other cities where it just becomes, corporate and, Starbucks here and all of these types of things everywhere, but no sense of soul or culture. I don't think that Newark will ever not have a sense of soul and culture. If you go outside today, you're going to probably hear, music coming from our parks and see people gathering and dancing. It's one of the things that I just really love about being here. So we're in the fourth year now of the Arts Fund, the Creative Catalyst Fund. We provide to date $2.3 million to over 400 artists and art institutions in the city, and I'm really proud of that. Another accomplishment, and I can't take credit for this because it's been in motion for almost 7 to 10 years or something, and that's the Gant Gilbert Arts Collective. It's
Yes.
a property at 505 Clinton that has a beautiful performance space where we're starting to have some artistic programming there, open mics, all kinds of events, but it also provides affordable housing for our residents and for local artists. So I encourage people to check out that property. It's a beautiful space and it's named after two of our most important artists and cultural workers, Jerry Gant, our beloved Jerry Gant, who we
Yes,
love and
everybody.
miss so much, and his spirit never leaves us. We will always keep saying his name. And also, I just smile just thinking about him. And Rodney Gilbert, whose birthday was actually yesterday, who
Yesterday.
also passed. And
Oh,
we just wanted to
Yes.
remember, them. And so their name and their spirit in the arts lives on through that space.
Rodney shares a birthday with the unconquerable Queen Mother Moore. Yesterday was her 125th birthday. I didn't know that. I'd have definitely lifted that up. Keep
Hmm.
going, keep going, keep going, as you were.
Um, let's see, what else have we been working on? Just really diversifying public art in the city. We have so many beautiful cultures here, the East Ward and the North Ward, the South Ward, the West Ward, the Central Ward. And if I had more money, I would be doing, public art and all types of things.
Well, that's what you oversee. And you're
Yes,
going to get that money. You know why? Because you're committed to it. You don't, she said, if I had more money, you got to say, I'm going to get more money.
I'm gonna
She,
get more
she
money.
oversees the city's public art program, creating opportunities for neighborhood revitalization and art-based community engagement. She oversees that. And so far, I know that Newark, yeah, funds some of your work. But can you hear me? I want to make sure.
Yes,
You're
Okay.
fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, but what's really important is that because of the work that you do, and because there's funding in the arts community, a lot of what you've done has been able to come into fruition. Um, she has some other stuff, guys, that she hasn't talked about that's in her bio. She's a writer.
Mm-hmm.
She's a cultural critic. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN Style, and FON, Women's Photographers and the African Diaspora. That's just among other books and publications. In
That's
2019, Barbara,
Yeah.
if you following her after all them years, she founded A Womb of Violet, a project-based collective that celebrates the work of Black women writers, poets, and artists. With over 20 years of experience in arts administration, her career emphasizes collaboration, cultural organizing, and community engagement as essential and meaningful experiences that challenges the way we see the world, ourselves, and each other. This woman right here, this sister right here, this loving, awesome leader here in the city of Newark, there could not have been a better selection that Mayor Raz J. Baraka could have chosen to lead our arts community. So we talked about the writer, the public arts. We could not have enough time to talk about all you've done in these 20 years because we started this conversation with you telling us where the journey began. Of course, voices was the echoes. You were now see, don't let me call it wrong.
African Echoes.
African Echoes. Don't call it wrong. African Echoes, because someone who was there would probably call me on my cell if they have it and say that's not what they call it. African Echoes. I don't know if you were old enough. Were you at the Sterling House too?
No,
You weren't even born, right? That was before both our
I
times.
wasn't at this.
No, you came along a little later.
But thanks to Baba Zaid, I learned a lot about political prisoners and started
Whoa,
to engage in doing work on behalf of political prisoners, in particular Sundiata Acoli, who was freed from prison last year. Just amazing. And other political prisoners, former Black Panthers, have been freed in the past couple of years, and that work
Michelle McGee
has
just
been
got out
long
after
and
58
meaningful.
years. Michelle McGee out this week, 58 years.
58 years.
Soledad brothers.
Keep them coming. Keep them
See,
coming.
he understands the assignment, his assignment. And that's what's key, Brother Ed, understanding your assignment. Whatever your assignment is, you will stay with it, you'll be consistent with it, you'll be persistent with it. And Brother Baba understands his assignment. Political prisoners, that is something, that's one of them. But you never give up making us aware or having our consciousness be jarred, about listen, jog. Listen, these people are bound. They're locked up. They don't deserve it. They need to be let go. And, there have been people that stood out. Look at what they did to the White House on January 6th. You know what I'm saying? These people came by the thousands. If you could get that kind of movement, some of our political prisoners would not be in jail right now. The difference is we got to understand that we have to come together and unify with the arts, with legal. All of us have a part to play. And so the arts has been an escape for many people.
But it
arts has
doesn't
been an
have to
escape.
be an escape. It can be an organizing tool.
It can be an organized. It's. I don't mean an escape in a bad way.
Movement. That's
No. When I say the arts, it can be. Let me get away from this madness because this is what I need to be focused on to assist to move forward to help my people.
It's your
Like
voice.
there's some things
It's
that
our
said in
voice.
poetry that people say, "Wow, you know what? I never." This is just a different way to look at it. I'm involved right now with an African American and Jewish conversation. I don't know if you've been in any of those conversations where we're coming together to have conversations. And if you were to really listen, you would think when they did a piece on, they did a James Baldwin piece and there was another piece, and that was written years ago. And when you listen to the James Baldwin piece and you listen to some of the writings that they have, there's so many similarities about freedom in the writings. It's just that the people that were writing it was trying to write something to tell us, listen, this needs to take place. This is what's happening. This we don't want to accept. This is how I feel. So when I say it's an escape, I'm not saying to get away from the movement. It's another movement that we're trying to get away from the madness so that we can release and express through another way. I guess, does that make sense?
It's also very important to affirm this too, is that in the necessary emergence and affirming of the arts with proper cultural identity and affirmation. For example, the Harriet Tubman piece and the removal of Christopher Columbus.
Right.
Was never in Newark, right? And whose whole legacy represents genocide and erasure.
Absolutely.
In our struggle to combat gentrification, right? One of the key elements of gentrification is erasure, right? But when you have a mobilized arts community as well as a community that's mobilized around staying and upgrading and taking care of their own community, you ain't gonna erase them for it.
And that's fact, because I tell people all the time, there's a book and it says in the beginning. I don't care how you write that book, it's going to always start out with in the beginning God created. I don't care how many people write it, how many ways they twist it. The thing is, through the arts, people are learning a whole lot about our history because they are trying to erase it. And the truth is, as long as we voice and keep our voices moving, listen, do you think how do you think I feel about the people that were mad that we took the statue down? Like, come on, who are you?
My favorite phone call. She goes, "Kid, I need you to be there."
But why would you even want to? You talking about a culture.
Columbus poem, and we took it down.
Yeah, but my thing is, you were talking about the Italian culture, but did anybody think about our culture and what took place with us? The Santa Maria and all these boats that we was talking about in elementary school, how he discovered America, just lies. But the real truth, you not put that in the history book where our brothers and sisters came over in the bottom of ships and was packed like sardines. And you're not sharing that. But I bet you the Jewish community will never let you forget the Holocaust. Never, ever, never, ever. But we don't know how to share. And our children, it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that our babies, because they came up learning these lies, and they're still being taught these lies, and now they're trying to erase the truth completely out of the schools, and they're trying to put it in law and get rid of our black authors that were trying to tell the truth. I had a teacher in elementary school that refused when I was in 5th grade to teach out of the American history book. She said, I'm going to go get the American Mayflower. Before the Mayflower, she had us reading books like The Spook Was Sat by the Door. Now, you can't, that was in the library, but it wasn't in the school library. But before the Mayflower, she went to Newark Public Schools Administration and came back to Clementary.
Roundtree, let me just check with Sister Shakur. How's your time? Because I know we said 30 minutes. We want to be respectful. Are you okay to stay?
You gotta go?
Another 10 minutes?
Yes, absolutely.
You good? This is exciting. Listen, if she wanted to go, she would have told us. You wouldn't have to ask her. She said, well, look, and she would do it politely. She would say, so it's been so nice being with you all this evening. Thank you so very much for having me on. And you guys just have a good evening. And she would, am I right?
I was raised right, Reverend
She
Roundtree.
was.
Oh,
She was.
Roundtree. We wanted to come back to the disciples, so we want to be respectful of our time because
Well, how much time we have left?
we got another 15 minutes. We just want to don't we gave her
You're
30.
not gonna let me talk for no 15 more minutes. You better keep on this one.
So I think one of the things I'd like to chime in on with you, Sister Shakur. First off, I want to say that I mean, just hearing about your background is amazing to me, particularly because you came up and I begin to understand how all of our connections to who Mayor Baraka is, to who Amina Baraka is, and to who Amiri Baraka is. I understand all of our connections, right? What's beautiful is that when I hear you talk, right, and and when Roundtree lays it out, one of the things we understand is that those of us who are born again and understand God, we know that nothing just happens. We know
That's
that
right.
this is God's plan. You are exactly where you're supposed to be at this very moment, right? And I think that one of the things I want you to bring forth at this moment is, because when Mayor Baraka talked about that Harriet Tubman project, he talked about how those people who were in charge down there almost told them that they could not remove Christopher Columbus. And he said that he got together with the other council members and he said that in his mind, he was like, well, I'm the mayor. How is it that you can tell me as the mayor and the city council that we can't remove a statue, but we're the ones in power? Now, and all that Roundtree just lifted up, I'm gonna have to get her a tam and a black leather jacket because she's talking black culture for real. But I want to ask you, when
That's
you,
not new.
so I
I
want,
learned that from being around people like Baba, Mayor Baraka, Larry Ham, and
yeah.
Director Shakur. So I
So
didn't know. I wasn't always woke. Go
well,
ahead.
when you came to that project, were you aware of what y'all were up against at that very moment?
Um, I wasn't really thinking about the opposition. I was thinking about the opportunity and the fact that we had a mayor who told me we were going to take Columbus down. He said, and
Mm.
he asked me what I thought about that. He said, do you think we should remove it? And what an opportunity. How
Right,
incredible. How many years have we talked about the lies that Reverend Roundtree talked about that our children have been learning in history?
Chop
And
down the
here we
cherry
have this
tree.
opportunity to
Ooh.
shift the narrative and
right.
tell the truth, to remove Columbus off his pedestal and replace it with history relevant to our people and our children today. I didn't really think much about the opposition, but they came and they tried to be strong.
Mm.
Um, and it's difficult when you're in government and you can't always say the things you want to say. But I leave all that to the mayor. I didn't have to say a word. The
Right,
mayor had it all covered.
right,
I
You got
just
courage. You ain't
I,
scared.
I just had to do the work behind the
right,
scenes to push it forward. And
right.
him giving me the agency and authority to do that work, is something I'll just never forget and always value.
Well, one thing I want to say for sure is that I was so proud of you. I didn't know you, didn't know anything about you, but I can tell you that me and my wife went down there, sat in that space, and I lifted up a prayer for you and just said, "Man, thank God for Fayemi Shakur. This beautiful black woman would come and do this." Not only because remember, it is a lasting testimony, right? Not only to this man, but it's a lasting testimony to you because it speaks to what was on the inside of you creatively and you brought it out, right? And that could only come out of a black woman.
Well,
And
I didn't design it. It was designed by a wonderful, beautiful black woman
right,
architect,
I know the
Nina
picture.
Cook John.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Nina
yeah,
Cook John is the designer. But
Yes.
yeah,
but
yeah,
but
And
yes,
for me,
it,
it
it
was a
was
blessing. We
one.
had some of Harriet, her family. I think her niece or
Yes,
somebody was there.
her
Good
great
evening,
great.
Kim Riley, with your
Mm,
beautiful self. Yeah, she was there. That was a blessing to have. Here we go with legacy and lineage through the arts. You're able to reach a relative to come and see this monument in honor of her, one who said I could have freed more slaves if they just knew they were slaves. We still using that today.
And for our children to learn correct history, to learn that New Jersey was the last state in the Union
So,
to
yes,
abolish slavery,
slavery.
to learn that there were safe houses and Black churches here in Newark that were
That's
part of
right.
the Underground Railroad that provided safety for enslaved Africans to travel through on their way. Our children need to know what Newark's contribution is to the liberation struggle, and for us to tell that story and recognize how important storytelling is for our young people. But Harriet Tubman, through my own personal struggles, just thinking about how courageous she was and how afraid she must have been, and all the different emotions that she must have been through was definitely a inspiration for me to try and push a little bit harder. If she could do all the things that she did,
In her
what,
time.
what can't we do, and what excuses are we going to make when she could do such a thing? So every now and again you need a good story, or you need a guide, you need something to hold on to aspire to give you
Courage.
some inspiration and courage. And um,
Ancestors are
And some in
always,
power, because sometimes we don't realize it.
always there for us to go to.
Yep, that's it. Sometimes you don't realize the power. I often say to my 28-year-old child that God knew what he was doing when some of us were not born during slavery, because we would have never, all of it was sacrificed for us to be where we are. Harriet Tubman was a soldier. She was in the military. There's some people just think she freed slaves, but she did a whole lot more than that. So, Director Shakur, Brother Ed, and Brother Zai, we just have to continue telling what we know to help our young people realize they can do. They have more and are doing less. During Harriet Tubman's time, they had less and did more.
That's right.
And so I don't know if it's because during this age they have access to so much that they don't realize um, the sacrifice is real, but they don't have to. What are they sacrificing?
Well,
You have
I think
the
there's so much
internet, you have all
programming,
of this
Reverend Roundtree. I think it's programming all
that
around them that
that
distracts them. And we
bam.
have to believe in the power of self-education, being self-taught, not just what it was fed to us, in schools and in institutions, and
And at
at
home,
home, at the dinner table, on Saturdays when you're taking your kids out. Those are opportunities for us to
you
to
talking
teach
about
our
another village
teach our
now.
own history to our children.
You
Let me
talking
bring
about
this,
another village, Director.
let me bring this back
Go ahead, Bob.
to the spiritual space that we're in, because this is the disciples moment. That's the spiritual space of all politics and local. And I wanted to lift up this thing, and I want I want you to lift up an accomplishment that you did a little more that I think felt a bit too much under the radar and is underappreciated. When I mentioned that our young folks gave us the largest protest summer in the history of this country 2 years ago with the George
Oh
Floyd.
yeah,
We're also talking about the advance and the emergence of what we call in the land of culture, the divine feminine, the emergence of the feminine principle in our culture, that powerful wave of feminine energy that will help a community heal, but at the same time will also hold you accountable for what's not correct. You
that's right.
understand? So many young women were out in front of that, right? And the arts is a healing space. But I want you to lift up more how wombs of violet came together, right? That
Mhm.
the epic anthology of these incredible women,
That's
right,
right.
coming together in one space, lifted up in a particular volume, because it is such an expression of
Yes,
that emergence that
yes.
the whole world needs right now.
That's right.
We
I,
stand
I,
on
That's
in this
right.
argument that the whole world needs right now.
That's right.
yeah, so many Black women writers and poets have inspired me for so long. Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, Ntozake Shange, Amina Baraka, our very own, and Alice Walker, Toni Kadi Bambara. These are all Black women thinkers who we can go back to their work and be inspired by. And so I wanted to pay homage to them. And I had a residency at a local gallery, Project for Empty Space, which is run by two women. And I had an opportunity to use what they call a risograph machine, which is kind of like a photocopying machine, but you print one color at a time. And it's kind of a retro way of doing things, and another way to make art and to make art books. But when they told me that I could make a book, I was thinking about, maybe I'll publish some of my short stories. People don't know I write short stories, so maybe I'll use it for that. But it was such a profound opportunity for me to bring in more people than just myself. And I wanted to share the space and the opportunity with others. So I invited some sisters who maybe, I knew of the work, I saw them in the community, but you know how you see people and you just kind of say, oh, hey, how you doing? But you don't really know them. You don't really know their artistic practice or their theory or, how they make their work. And so I wanted to share my residency with them. And that's how I use that. And they contributed, their poems and their art to the anthology. And I wanted to make sure it was also archived because, sometimes I think about, the Harlem Renaissance and, all of those writers and artists of that time. And, as a community, and if somebody didn't archive that work, we wouldn't know that it needs to be celebrated. So with these art books that I made, I sent them to the Schomburg and to the Yale Rail Book and Manuscript Collection and the Met Museum's library and our own library to make sure that, it was in those collections for, the future.
Beautiful. Before we run out of time, what I'd like you to talk a little bit about, Sister Shakur, if you could. Symphony Hall has really been a real neighborhood space for all of us, right? And when you talk about Mayor Baraka back in the day when he was a student, and he would come home, they used to, and of course, all of the young people, there was a space up there where everybody used to meet, go up there, do poetry and all that. You probably remember some of that yourself. What's your vision for Symphony Hall in terms of trying to bring it back to its former glory or create new glory, however you see?
Well, it's such a gem in our community, and I love hearing people's stories about all the different performances that they saw in that space. I've heard stories about Jimi Hendrix performing there, and James Brown, and
Barry White.
Barry White was there.
Yeah, that's not. He came one year. He came, I think. I saw a post where Frankie Crocker, I think, was the host. There was a young lady named Angela Bofield who was phenomenal. Al Green, Symphony, and then known for gospel shows as well.
It is the only.
Wait a minute, hold on. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came there and did Savior's Day there a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, Baba?
It is the only Black art performance space in the state, and it's on the historic register of places. So we have to preserve it.
I did not know that that you just shared. I did not know it was the only Black performing arts space. Wow!
And
it wasn't originally built. We converted it. The city, I believe, the city converted it because it was initially a Masonic hall. That was built back in the early 1900s, maybe I don't remember, but I know I did a little research. I like to do research. I did research today, 1925. But I did research a while ago when they were talking about doing some other stuff with it years ago. And we were praying that it was not closed down, shut down.
And I'm glad, they're the folks who have served on the board.
We need Symphony Hall.
We need Symphony Hall and
the Terrace Ballroom.
The Sarah Vaughan Concert Hall is just acoustically one of the best in the nation,
Yes.
on par with Carnegie Hall in New York. And
Yes.
so we want to bring it back and restore it to its beauty and become a space where we can share, more performances, more engagements, more theater,
Yes.
bringing back Black theater and poetry and dance and
Mm.
all of those elements. So far, we have restored the Terrace Ballroom, which is
Yes.
back
It's
open,
fabulous.
brand new, and
Oh,
I
Lord.
hope that you all go and enjoy some soul line dancing and some future programming that we see there. But Symphony Hall now has a new CEO, Miss Talia Young, who is just
Another phenomenal
phenomenal,
force.
phenomenal, and really, sometimes we are. Um, I don't know the word off the top, but unassuming, I think. And Talia is one of those unassuming women who you don't know until you sit down and hear her vision, how dynamic and powerful and beautifully brilliant she is. So I'm really looking forward to,
Listen,
her leadership and what's to come for Symphony Hall.
anything Talia puts her hands on, you can best to believe it's going to blossom. Just like everything you put your hands on in the arts, these two young women are a force to be reckoned with, and I'm sure that we're going to bring Talia on as well. But today, as they say in the church, but today we are with the wonderful, phenomenal queen that we all know as Fayemi Shakur.
Thank
And
you.
it has just been such, I don't know about Brother Baba. I have prayed with this young lady. So this is the disciples. Y'all do know
That's
that,
right.
that this is the disciples. And there are three faith leaders that Brother Ed, with his wisdom, asked Minister Haqq Muhammad to come and lead this show. And he invited, of course, the two of us, myself and Brother Ali. So, from a spiritual perspective, God has kept you, God has sustained you, God has not always used the terminology. Whatever God ordains, He will maintain and sustain. And through many dangers, toils, and snares, you have come. But God has kept you, blessed you, and you're still carrying on, doing the work, getting ready to do greater by way of Symphony Hall. So, as
Yeah.
we were talking about Talia, once again, anything you put your hands on and put your mind to, this is a blessing, Brother Ed, for
Yep.
to be on All Politics and Local, the #1 hip hop radio show, I'm going to say in America. But
That's
anyway,
A lot of people prayed for me, Reverend Roundtree,
oh, I know.
and um, you don't know how important those prayers were to me and still are to me. So thank you.
Every now and then I shoot you a little something, something via text because we need to stay connected. Because guess what? She needs encouragement. Baba needs encouragement. Brother Ed got Kim to encourage him. No, let me stop.
well, Sister Shakur, we're out of time, but we want to give you the last word. So, anything you want
Yes.
to say in parting, please.
Well,
Okay,
yes, I
Ed, you
would
gotta ask
like
a question.
everyone to visit HarrietTubmanMonument.com. The website is visit HarrietTubmanMonument.com. And there you can learn all about the monument. We have audio stories on there that you can listen to. People in the community shared their personal stories about liberation and what liberation means to them. And I would really like for people to go on that website and just listen to some of those personal testimonies.
Ed, you got to ask her the ritual question, Ed, before she goes.
He's on mute.
Ed, what the question is this? We always ask our guests when they come
Oh, what's
on.
your number?
No. Who are you listening to in terms of hip hop? Who
Yeah.
are you listening to? Who's your inspiration? Who's your go to right now? In terms of going.
In terms of hip hop,
Yes.
oh,
And what
wow.
people who's your favorite
In
artist?
terms of hip hop, who have I been listening to? To be honest, I haven't been listening to hip hop much. I've been listening to more jazz.
Yeah.
Robert
Go ahead. I
Glasper.
want to hear that.
Robert
Have you ever
Glasper.
had a hip hop artist that
Robert
you listen
Glasper
to?
is of the hip hop generation, but Robert Glasper
Right.
is phenomenal, phenomenal artists to listen to.
Yes.
And also, Black August is coming, so we got to read.
Right.
In this
Right.
book right here, The American Family, the Shakurs, and the Nation They Created. This is my book
Yes.
recommendation for you for Black August. Okay?
All right.
Yes.
And
All right.
also,
All right.
wait, this one,
Come on, she getting these books out.
Black Women Writers at Work. It's
Okay.
an anthology that features Maya Angelou, Toni Kade Bambara, Gwendolyn Brooks, Nikki Giovanni, Audre Lorde. The list goes on and on, but it's all about Black women writers. So
Nice.
those are my inspirations for now.
Ooh,
All
we
right. All right.
love it. Love it.
All right. Well, we're definitely gonna have to have you back
Got to
on.
come back for part 2.
Yeah, because we've only scratched the surface. So many other things we'd like to talk with you about. Roundtree, any announcements you want to make before
Well,
we
I
move?
got so many announcements. I do know I want to announce that on tomorrow there was supposed to be a Southward spiritual engagement in one of our areas that need a little attention on Freeland Island and Evergreen. It's been moved to Sunday. Freeland Island Avenue and Evergreen between 2 and 7. There will be groceries given away, prayers. It's spearheaded by the South Ward Clergy Alliance. And that's under the leadership of Bishop Rouse, which is our South Ward leader for the faith base, along with Brenda Bird and some other pastors. And then there is on Tuesday, National Newark Night Out. There will be an event held in Westside Park, and there will be an event held on South Orange Avenue between Stuyvesant and Telford. I'm excited, Ed, about the leadership, Brother Ed and Baba Zaid. The mayor is doing a reading under the stars on August 9th. And, that is just something that is so key. We have to help our children. We have to encourage them to read, encourage our friends. Listen, they have Audible now. You just listen to books. But I think that what helped me with my vocabulary is to read it, to get the words from looking at them. I appreciate Audible and I appreciate listening to a good story. But I also appreciate picking up those books that our sister just showed us to be able to read the story. There's Brick City Peace Skate, which is being held. Is that today? Today is the 28th. Well, I guess we missed that one. That was from 11 to 3. August 11th, though, there'll be another Brick City Peace Skate. August 11th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the North Ward at the waterfront is where they'll be leaving from. That's August 11th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We're doing all we can to keep the individuals in the communities aware that we want to focus on peace in our streets. We want to focus on nonviolence. We want to say also, yes, if there's no justice, there's no peace, but we create our own peace. So my final words are just to thank Fayemi for what she's doing. Thank her for coming on this show. Director, you're an amazing woman. We thank God that you took the time. We thank God for Brother Ed, who thought it not robbery. I don't see Jonathan on here throwing his hands up and the peace sign. Lady Kim, I was waiting for the sergeant at arms. He must be leaving it on Brother Ed to do it tonight. The Sister Shakur, he will shut us down and come on and tell us that it is over. Ma'am, your time is up. If you haven't finished your announcements now, you better give them to somebody to announce next week, because this is it. That's enough. All is said, and we're done. It's been great being with you tonight, and thank you all who tuned in. Once again, we live in the best city. I'm from Newark, and I'm proud of it. We'll continue to lift up our mayor, our council, all of our administration, all of the individuals in our city of Newark, praying a special prayer for our soldier and comrade, Pastor Bryant Ali, and leading lady of this generation, Melina Ali, praying for traveling mercies for Minister Haqq Muhammad, on his way to Chicago, that he'll return to us safe and more on fire than he left. Now, where's the Sister Williams? And I'm turning it back. Let me get off the show. The Disciples was over 3 minutes ago. Thank you, Brother Ed.
Yep.
It's over 10 minutes ago. We got you.
Yeah.
I know. Listen, you want someone give me another topic, we'll be on another 15 minutes with Reverend Shakur.
Jonathan is he's actually out of town.
So. See, I knew there was something. Yeah. I said it is 7.
We understand how important your announcements are. So Zaya and I, we extended a little bit. But Sister Shakur, thank you so much. And we'll get you back on. And Rountree, thank you for coming through to do the show and holding it up for your partners. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Love you, Newark. Love you all, Politics and Local, and Baba Zai. Peace.
Yeah. Good segment.
Good
stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Oh, Ike, you look like you're in some place where you're secure. You was worried about getting on because you were in the street checking out an important resource for us. We're going to transition now to our Cuba segment. We may have someone else jump in. I was trying to get some other folks to join us, Ike. I was trying to, Sister Dolomar Malave, Lerone, one of our daughters, if Ifko may get on if she can. She's traveling. Trying to get also one of my mentors, Tony Menelik Vandermeer, who's based in Boston, who's back and forth to Cuba extensively, and some other folks. But we got you. This is a heavy moment. A lot is going on in terms of where we need to be going in terms of Cuba's solidarity. But first, let's acknowledge this particular fact in this particular moment. We are in the process of observing the 70th anniversary of the launch of the epic Cuban Revolution. Cara, back on July 26, 1953. And we will celebrate that at the Shabazz Center this coming Saturday. This comes in the context of a lot of stuff. One, it comes in the context of one of our comrades, the great Gail Walker, recently going to visit Senator Menendez around some, questioning about his policy, that there are other voices on the U.S. policy that is opposed to his policy, who winds up getting arrested. There's a development of the New York City Council passing a resolution calling for taking Cuba off of the terrorist list and ending this blockade that is almost as old as I am, and I'm in my 60s now, right? And there's so there's a lot of activity. The Shabazz Center itself, Monday was a heavy day for us at the Shabazz Center because there's a renewed call to investigate the assassination of Malcolm X. And Malcolm, at the top of the epic decade of 1960s, turned our people's eyes towards what revolution looks like with the embrace of Fidel Castro coming into New York, bringing them to Harlem, and embracing revolutionary Cuba. So the whole question of solidarity for Cuba is hugely important at this moment. So Ike Nahem, Ike is an important voice for us in terms of all of these current fronts that we're talking about. Ike, come on in.
Thank you. Thank you, Zaid. Thank you so much. What you just said, it brings home all the stuff that's happening right now. It's in the context and it's amplified by the intensification of the U.S. government blockade, what we call the blockade, which is an extraterritorial embargo, the use of sanctions and banking and keeping Cuba on this bogus U.S. government terrorist list that prevents it from carrying out economic transactions, and the deepening of the impact of this in Cuba. And we see no evidence that and this is the context of all the activities that we're stepping up towards that takes place on July 26th, what you referred to with Sister Gail's action, along with others at Menendez's office. The July 26th activity here, the passing of the city council resolution, all of these things, even as this crisis deepens, the Biden administration, the bipartisan Congress, the State Department, none of them, there's no evidence of any shift on their part. They're intensifying the blockade despite their isolation hemispherically, despite their isolation internationally, which will be reflected again. So that gives a certain urgency and poignancy to our struggle and the need to step up our struggle in the streets, in every arena that we can fight to get the truth out. And that's what we're going to be doing at this event tomorrow night at the Shabazz Center, where we have a fantastic program that I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Well, let's take it apart. Let's take apart all these things that we're talking about, right? We talking. Senator Menendez is the New Jersey senator, right? Right. Gail Walker was, lives right in neighboring Orange, New Jersey, and is from Hackensack, New Jersey, right? So I want to bring this back to some of our local stuff, right? Let's talk about the local context. Lay out some of the local context that's important to this conversation. I also want to, before you answer, I want to shout out one of our co-founders, Ed Bashir Akinyele, who just came back from Cuba for the first time himself. And I was trying to get his behind on here. He ain't come on, right? But I was trying to get his behind on it because he was amped up. He had a great experience, a great educational experience, right? Did it on his own. And it really has he is one of a lot of stories that those of us who actually have gone to Cuba need to lift up in the responsibility that we have to educating this public to change these policies, right? So I want to shout out Bashir, and I have to also make at the same time make a call for his behind to come back on the show to share that out and to share that out on some other platforms that we're gonna have to build up and support a solidarity work. But now I go ahead and lift up what you was gonna lift up.
Well, I would say that the locally, like the New York City Council resolution and Washington, D.C. passed a resolution about a month prior to that, is one of some 93 city councils, labor unions, state bodies that have passed resolutions. Many major cities in the Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, have done that. So that registers the fact that the U.S. public opinion, to the degree that you can measure it in the context of the unrelenting and stepped up lies and propaganda against Cuba that comes down hot and heavy as the U.S. tries to salvage and continue its policy. And let me also say, you do have Menendez, just like Florida has Rubio. But let's always remember that they may be the most strident and the ugliest haters as Cuban Americans that support the counter-revolution, that were the people that were part of the old ruling classes of Cuba that were booted out, that supported Batista, and that the revolutionaries, as we'll celebrate tomorrow night, kicked out. But the policy is not directed by or originates with them. They are a cover for what is a bipartisan, Democratic and Republican, the leaderships of both parties, as much as they scream and yell and contend with each other in the regular capitalist political intrigue. On Cuba, they are very united and they complement each other. And as I said earlier, they're not showing any sign of backing down. But at the same time, U.S. public opinion, locally, nationally, hemispheric public opinion. Recently, the EU and the CELAC met and again reaffirmed opposition to the embargo. U.S. policy is completely isolated, has gained no traction, but it continues, and the oppressiveness of it, the brutality of it, is manifesting itself. It's an accumulated impact in Cuba. We've been there recently, both Zaid, myself, and many others, solidarity activists that have gone to Cuba and that can see the accumulated impact in shortages, in medical shortages, in rising prices. all of these that are directly and indirectly impacted on by the U.S. economic war against Cuba. And it's accompanied by a political war. And the Menendezes and the Rubios and those people are certainly the front for it. But it's a bipartisan policy, which doesn't mean it can't be pressured. It is being pressured, and we can force a change. But like Malcolm X said, a chicken cannot produce a duck egg, and these guys do not want to make any concessions around allowing Cuba to prosper and be the example of a society where the working people are in power, that consciously fights racism, sexism, and all of the struggles, and is an example to the world as it has been. And they've, for 63 years, tried to wipe that out, and they're still not through trying. They think they can just asphyxiate it, to do it without direct bombs or Bay of Pigs type operations, just by the steady strangling of the country. But we're going to counter that and all throughout the next period.
Name some of the cities that have done resolutions against Cuba, and I'll come back with a follow-up challenge to our audience that we need to figure out also, because I want folks to understand just how this groundswell is developed.
Yes. New York was actually the biggest city. I mean, it's the biggest city in the country anyway, that late in passing it. But prior, Chicago, Cleveland, the Bay Area, including a lot of the, San Jose, Richmond, the different areas in the Bay Area that make up the Bay Area. Many other cities. If you go to our website, www.us-cubanormalization.org, we have on there a list of all 93. There's many other important cities that have passed resolutions. Hartford, Connecticut. I'm just off the top of my head. Now, of course, Newark, I think, is a city that we need to add to that list. And a lot of folks at the rally tomorrow, we're going to have a wonderful group of activists speak out that were involved in getting the resolution passed, including Jacob Buckner and Molly Moser from the DSA, Rosemary Mealy won't be there, but we'll be giving a solidarity message. Joan Gibbs, others, and going to get up and Omawali Clay's office, Vincent Verdi from the December 12th movement. We're going to have a video of Charles Barron's remarks and the voice vote in favor of it. So we're going to have a whole section on that and a video clip of it. So that'll be really good. And hopefully we'll get folks in Newark to present a resolution. We have model resolutions, and that would be great, and many other cities. But it shows that among the people, especially the people that have any consciousness about Cuba and what Cuba has meant in the fight against racism, for African liberation, the recently passed Families Code, to get together, to unite whatever differences we may have on other questions, and fight this blockade, because it's not only a crime, but it is just a in-your-face crime. They're just doing it, and they don't care how hypocritical they look. And we have to step up our action.
I want to lift up something else too, because there's a Newark angle to it too, and she's not on too now. I don't think we've had her on before. But Cuba is also very famous and loved in the world community for its legendary sharing of its revolutionary medical infrastructure and its medical village, when using the language of African culture, right? And there's a filmmaker by the name of Jen Wager, who's done an amazing film called Dare to Dream about Cuba's legendary international medical school that is training people to become doctors from a wide plethora of places throughout the world, but particularly the Southern Hemisphere, right? those places that are being whose economies are being strangled by countries like the United States and the larger capitalist global infrastructure, and whose countries face a poverty that wouldn't normally allow them to have such an education. But that is in fact happening, and it is just further endeared Cuba to the world. And in the face of all of this stranglehold of the blockade, during the COVID crisis, Cuban doctors engaged people in 40 countries, 40 countries around the world, and not just in the Southern Hemisphere, some in Europe too. Cuba went to Italy, right? This small country, the size of New York City, right? Going to not just the Southern Hemisphere, our so-called poorer countries, but even the Europe and some of the an important European country, right? Helping stem the tide of the COVID crisis that took a whole lot of people out of here, and that a whole lot of folks simply did not know how to respond to, right?
And,
So,
and what did the U.S. do at that time? What the U.S. did, they deepened the blockade. At the same time that when they saw Cuba as being vulnerable, while Cuba was carrying out this amazing medical internationalism, the U.S. used the COVID crisis to deepen the blockade against Cuba. That's how brutal, the Biden administration continuing the Trump measures has been. But that's also why what you referred to is why Cuba, when you go and watch the debates at the UN, which the U.S. votes gets outvoted in overwhelmingly. You see Caribbean and African and Asian and other countries that benefited directly from Cuban medical internationalism get up and give eloquent speeches against the blockade. And all of these forces, but this is true. I've always said that two of the best avenues for us to reach broad layers of the U.S. working class and people around Cuba solidarity and tell them the truth is medical internationalism and the historic role around African liberation. And a lot of people know about that, and we need to there's a lot of films out, Cuba in Africa, by my friend and brother Nagash Abdurrahman, that tells that story. And we're going to reflect that again at the event tomorrow.
So let's take a dive and talk about the event a little bit tomorrow. About who's going to be there, what's going to be uplifted, right? How we move forward, and I raised the whole question about this local thing because we certainly can talk about Newark trying to figure out how to do a resolution, but I think that there's a need for New Jersey is not just black, white, and Cubans who hate Fidel. You know what I mean? The whole world has changed, in a big way, and New Jersey certainly changed in a big way since 1962 when the blockade was first implemented. And I believe if we do our work right, that we should be able to get resolutions from a number of cities in New Jersey, right? Cities that look like what the country looks like, not just how Miami looks, right? But that looks like the rest of the country, and how the rest of the country gets and understands the importance and the value of the Cuban Revolution, and how wrong and how backwards and outdated this blockade is. So let's take a dive and then talk about what's going to happen tomorrow night. A few minutes we have left.
Well, one of our features actually is yourself. You're going to honor us with a reading of your wonderful poem, Red Star. Our featured speaker will be the new Cuban ambassador to the United Nations, Gerardo Peñalver Portal. We also will have, as I mentioned earlier, the section on the how we passed the city council resolution. We also have a message from Alenia Cruz, who's the secretary of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party in New York. And we will also afterwards, we're going to have some music and have a food. The reception is from 6 to 7, and the program from 7 to 8:30. Then we're going to have an after party, and we'll have dance, music, and we'll also have mojitos. So that will be good, free, and so it should be a fun evening and also a serious evening. We're going to get this message out, but we'll have a chance for our whole movement to get together. We expect to have many Cubans from the mission staff are in Cuba for the celebrations there, but we will have, a good number of mission members that are staying here and their families that will be here, that will be celebrating with us. So we really encourage everybody to come. Doors will open right around before 6 o'clock, and reception program and after party.
Let's go. And I want everybody to look forward to that. I'm very excited about it. And the piece that I talked about is a memorial praise poem that I wrote for Fidel when he passed. And Ike and I, a bunch of us were in Cuba just recently for an international education symposium that Cuba hosted. And there was a segment of that symposium that wanted to focus on 3 people and how we need to consider them being taught in Cuba schools and in schools throughout the Americas. 1, on Fidel. How do we teach Fidel's history? 2, how do we teach Malcolm's history? And 3, how do we teach the legacy of unsung hero of international human solidarity, very close to the Cuban Revolution, and the late Reverend Lucius Walker, who's a Jersey boy, right? Lucius Walker is from Roselle, New Jersey, where I went to high school, and though he's better known more in organizing circles, right? But Reverend Lucius Walker had an incredible legacy. I call him the inside man of the epic calls for reparations aimed at the churches of the United States that James Forman led in 1969. The founder of IFCO, Pastors for Peace, who used for decades nonviolent protests with humanitarian aid, challenging bad U.S. foreign policy, imperialist, racist U.S. foreign policy, going to places like Nicaragua when the Contras were a mess, even got wounded and almost killed delivering humanitarian aid in defiance of U.S. foreign policy. And some 30 some odd years ago, when Gail and I first went to Cuba, we mapped out what became the U.S. French Shipment Caravan, where that whole notion of challenging U.S. foreign policy through humanitarian aid shifted squarely to Cuba. And Cubans love Lucius Walker for what he did with that to the fullest. He is a hero in international human solidarity circles who needs to be studied more. In fact, there's a young man I'm trying to lift up in some of our platforms, Ed, by the name of Ujamu Dillahunt Jr., who's a third generation radical in his family, only in his 20s, who's doing a whole history of Reverend Lucius Walker, right? So we've just been bringing it back. This is all politics of local acts. So I'm bringing it back to some of our local dimensions. And my little sister and my sister Gail, right? Gail, that arrest that she went through, that wasn't no light thing. And that wasn't no trivial thing. That was in the tradition of this solidarity, that Malcolm pointed us to way back in 1960s. He said that this is right and this is wrong. And if you're willing to arrest me for standing up for what's right in the face of you doing something that's wrong, go ahead and arrest me. Go ahead and arrest me, right? And so there's so many places to go with the continued growth of solidarity coming from our spaces in these United States in support of Cuba. That's important to lift up. So I just wanted to, just draw some of that out. Why don't you share some reflections on that trip? And you go back and forth more regularly, right? But share some of your reflections on our trip recently abroad to the symposium.
Well, that was a really inspiring and educational experience that we had there with the symposium that focused on the legacy and the interrelatedness of Fidel and the lives of Fidel and Malcolm X and Lucius and the connections and the forces that shaped them, the revolutionary periods and struggles that shaped them. It was really excellent experience. And just to segue on that, again, it's such an honor to have this event. We've had several over the years at the really the hallowed ground of the Shabazz Center. And we think it's a perfect venue because really Malcolm X was one of the first prominent voices in the United States that spoke out clearly against U.S. aggression against Cuba and also against the Vietnam War. Malcolm, especially in the
Malcolm
last
came
year
out
and a
for
half.
the Vietnamese. I want to be clear on that.
What's that?
He came out for the Vietnamese in the Vietnam.
No, that's what I meant, against the Vietnam War. Before several years before Martin Luther King did. I'm not criticizing Martin Luther King. That was a powerful speech and very important. But Malcolm was before he was murdered. He was getting ready to go on a national tour to speak against the Vietnam War. He had been very involved in and speaking out around the atrocities of imperialism in the Congo and in support of Patrice Lumumba. So this was the forces that shaped him and Fidel. And when they met in Harlem before, when Malcolm was still in the Nation of Islam, that was a meeting that really changed the world. And that solidarity continued and deepened in the last year and a half of Malcolm's life. So we're so honored to have this event here at the Shabazz Center tomorrow night.
I want to lift up my big sister and comrade, Panther warrior, the great Rosemary Mealy.
Yes.
She gave us the book, Memories of a Meeting, Fidel and Malcolm, and has been pivotal for decades. A pivotal example of Cuban solidarity. I want to lift up her husband and my big brother, Sam Anderson, from that same walk, right, for the role that they played in shaping and organizing our delegation, and the role that Sam has played over the years as a beacon of international solidarity, particularly on the education front, and some of the younger voices. I was trying to get Dolamar Malavi Lebron, one of the young voices in Pastors for Peace, a young Puerto Rican radical theologian, right, who now has the responsibility of the People's Church. People's Church is the church in El Barrio in New York that where the young lords really struck their space on the stage of history and challenging their local church community to be a part of the mutual aid that was so unique to the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, back during that period. Dolamar is a vibrant young voice that I'm very proud of, right? It was a powerful delegation. As we speak, she's a part of the Venceremos Brigade coming back from Cuba today. I used to go to Cuba many years ago through the Venceremos Brigade, in which Rosemary was a top officer during those days. And the Venceremos Brigade literally grew up with the Cuban Revolution. Started back in 1968 with the first major national harvest of the revolution to take folks from the United States to see the Cuban Revolution reality, as opposed to the propaganda, the anti-communist propaganda that has so blanketed the national conversation here in the United States. And there is a fresh wave that I want to leave this conversation on an upbeat note, just like the last conversation that we left. There's a fresh new wave of younger people.
Yes.
Black, brown, and white, that are now. When I was doing the Vincent Raymond's Brigade, I was the young head. Gail and I, we were young heads then, right? And I was, let's see, this is back in 1992 when we did. I was in my early 30s then, right? And I was the young head. We were the young heads. We were bringing older, North Americans who actually got on our damn nerves with their privilege and whatnot. Try to straighten their behinds out and to really respect and appreciate while we were bringing them down there. But now we've got a fresh new wave of younger people, from that age range and down, that are exploring, what it means to say and seek out the fact that another kind of world is possible, and why Cuba's example has always been so important to that. So I think if Dolomar wasn't on that delegation, where I'd been able to pull her today.
Definitely.
So
and she's fabulous. No, that point is very important, especially to close with, because it is true. We've definitely, and this is going to be one of the themes tomorrow, is that we have a generational transition that's going on, and it's very positive in the solidarity movement. And that's very important. And a lot of young people are being inspired, a new generation, by the example of Cuba. And the other thing that's very important is that I've been involved, as you have, in this struggle against the blockade and in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution for decades. And I think it's true that our movement has never been more united, even as we work on different fronts and in different arenas of struggle. But we've been coming together more and more, different organizations, multinational, younger people, as we've mentioned, different organizations, political parties that normally have a difficult time working with each other.
They got like 3 shows.
Political differences, but they are uniting against the blockade. And that's what we need. It's going to take that to really end it.
Yeah. I want you to lift this up too as we wind down, Ike, and I see my guest in my next segment get ready to come through, because that's very Malcolm centered. Our next segment. You one of the things that you've done in a hell of a conference almost annually for the last few years, and you've had some folks from our area make some special presentations at those conferences. You want to share, give folks who are not familiar with what you've done, who's been in that conference from this area?
Well, even though I was the central organizer of it, my brain sometimes to remember everything. But I will say that I'm always trying to look forward to what we're doing in the struggle coming ahead. The conference that we had March 11th and 12th at Fordham School of Law was really well attended by hundreds of people, many hundreds, up to 800 or 900 online in addition. And Rosemary was one of the speakers. We had Omawali and Gail Brewer from the city council, many speakers, workshops, panels, a lot of young people, and it came out with a plan of action, and I'd sort of like to just plug those. This October 6th, we're going to have united actions to demand that Cuba get off the U.S. state sponsors of terrorism list. October 6th is a special date. That was the date that U.S. trained and organized terrorists, Posadas Carillas, shot down a Cuban airliner, Flight 455, murdering 75 Cubans, one of many acts of terrorism directed against Cuba. And they have the nerve to put Cuba on the terrorism list. So October 6th, the UN vote coming up. We have a plan of action that came out of the conference that lays out ways to organize, including passing resolutions. I think it's great what your prospects in New Jersey are. Let us know how we can help nationally with that campaign. It looks fantastic. We're really stepping up the struggle because the crisis in Cuba, because of the blockade and its accumulated impact, has also stepped up. I was speaking to one of our brothers, Bob Schwartz from Global Health Partners, that's very involved in organizing health aid, including syringes to Cuba. He says literally people are dying in Cuba because of medical shortages, literally dying in Cuba because the U.S. blockade prevents Cuba from getting the equipment and medicines that it needs. So
How democratic is that?
outrageous and brutal and criminal, and we're not going to stand for it.
Mm-hmm. And then a couple of years ago, you had a young mayor from one of these progressive cities that's kind of dear to us. You want to give some folks just a little snippet on his presentation when he was there a little while ago?
Well, Mayor Baraka gave a wonderful presentation in 2017. And when we have one again next year, hopefully, we'll definitely invite him. And hopefully it'll be with the victory of a city council resolution passed in a number of Jersey cities.
Hopefully, yeah. We look
and of course, the Baraka family for many, many years, when we had our action in 2003 to celebrate 20 years. Amiri Baraka read a poem, and Amina was there. Amina used to come to all the events and celebrations that we have. It was just a wonderful thing.
We're gonna wind it up there. Ed, anything you want to share with or ask of Ike, or any outgoing questions?
Well, no,
you got to ask the ritual question too. This is not your first time on, Ike. You've been on before.
Yes.
Yeah, but you still got to ask me. You come on in, Ed.
Well, I think one of the things I'm curious about, Ike, is that I remember when COVID was happening, and we had Mayor Baraka on. This was at the early stages, and and they were saying early on that the doctors in Cuba had already found a cure for COVID. And I think for me, they seem to be far more advanced medically. And what I don't understand is why, with this particular embargo, why we're not opening those particular doors for the doctors or for the students to be able to go to Cuba and at least get that type of education. So is there any opportunity for an educational type exchange?
Well, you're thinking like the decent and moral human being that you are, but the people in the U.S. government don't really think that way. They saw the crisis around COVID as an opportunity, as I said earlier, to deepen the blockade. Cuba didn't really come up with a cure for COVID, but what they did come up with was 5 highly efficacious vaccines. They vaccinated the entire country. They shared it with other countries. The WHO, which the U.S. controls, World Health Organization, refused to, gave it a bureaucratic runaround, even though it was clear that it had worked 95%. Plus, they were the first and one of the only first countries, maybe one of the only countries that vaccinated their entire children from the age of 2 up, and highly successful. But while this was going on, of course, Cuba's tourist industry was devastated with COVID. And so the United States, instead of, opening up Cuban vaccines, and they even boycotted sending them ventilators. They had to make their own out of scratch from pumps in cars, and they did it. But instead of doing that, they deepened the blockade. And this goes to show that, what they're doing. But they can be pressured to act, and we get the truth out, and people, when they find out about it, they don't like it, and they want to fight against it. And that's what we're here to organize them to do.
So what it sounds like is that we could have saved a lot more lives.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. You compare Cuba's statistics, and this is a country that's suffering from the blockade and an economic crisis. You compare their statistics to the rest of Latin America, to the United States, per capita deaths, the type of treatment. But again, it's an amazing health system that they have. But right now, they're suffering from shortages, and the blockade is deepening right now. The conditions are very difficult right now in Cuba. So they have this amazing healthcare system. But, if you have a certain type of cancer and you can't get the medicine that's easily available on world markets because of the blockade, then you're going to die no matter how wonderful the healthcare system is. And that's the reality today.
And you know what I wanna conclude with you. Our brother Bashir just recently returned from Cuba this week, and one of the things he talked about was he said that he didn't feel or notice any white supremacy or racism while he was there. That the pressure that you feel in America, how can that be?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's no racism. There's still a legacy and everything. But in Cuba, the revolution, the government, the mass organizations are all consciously fighting against racism, and they preserve that legacy. And they make sure that if you go back to the early years of the revolution, when the campaigns against, Cuba was like a caricature, a replica of Jim Crow in the United States. Way before the Civil Rights Bill. I mean, I could go on. I mean, I don't want to cut into your next guest too much, but there's no question that in Cuba there is a consciousness to fight against racism and not the hypocrisy. But it's a difficult struggle, and of course there's inequalities, and some of the measures that they've had to take in Cuba to try to get out of this horrible economic crisis. Increase inequality, and there has to be a conscious struggle to make sure that doesn't result in racial disparities and so on in Cuba. But this is a huge question that I'm sure your program will tackle if it hasn't tackled already. There's a lot of literature coming out about this question, but I think for a young African American that goes to Cuba, they will feel that they have stepped into a different world.
Mm. Wow. All right. So here's our final question. Right. So we are a political hip hop radio talk show. You've been here before, so you know what we're going to ask you, and that is, what are you currently listening to keep you in the spirit of revolution from a hip hop perspective?
Well, I have to confess that although I go back when I lived in D.C., I was into groups like KRS and others. That shows how old I am. But I think, like your previous guest, lately when I'm writing or checking my emails or chilling out, I generally fall back, I have to say, on Thelonious Monk and classic jazz. That's what I'm very much into. And then a lot of blues and rock and roll. But I'm really not fluent on current hip hop, I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm always open to be educated to the good stuff.
Understood.
All right, Ike. We will be in Harlem's. Doors open at 6. Program starts at 7. 3940 Broadway at 168th Street, the Shabazz Center, the former Autobahn Ballroom, where we will be lifting up the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the epic Cuban Revolution. Thank you, Ike. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Zaid, so much.
Yeah. Zach is here, right? And I'm hoping Herb Boyd can get on, because Herb was actually at the Shabazz Center this past Monday. Now, for this next segment, we've got another heavy lift. And I think we've got, two of the right people to actually make this lift. February 21st was the 58th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. And the daughters of Malcolm X, the Shabazz family, held a press conference where they were going to initiate a lawsuit against several government entities, starting with New York City, New York State, and the federal government, and particularly all of its national security branches, for whatever role they played in the assassination of their father. This past Monday, there was a second press conference where one brother who was a part of the OAU, was a very young man back then, Mustafa Hassan, came forward after decades of not having shared his experience on that fateful day, shared his recall of what happened on that day, and what he was actually very close to. He actually had his hand physically on Talmadge Hayer, who was captured on the scene only as a consequence of one of Malcolm's men, because I never let anybody forget Brother Reuben Francis, right? One of Malcolm's men who was armed that day that popped Hare, and that's why Hare was actually captured. But this Mustafa Hassan actually had his hand on Hare. Police were trying to steward him out of in that difficult space that he had put himself into, and ultimately leading to his capture and his conviction. Right, Mustafa shared that story and recalled one of the officers that was in the middle of that melee saying to the other officer, referring to Hare, is he one of us? Meaning that he was asking the question as if they knew that there were New York City undercover operatives inside the ballroom where Malcolm was assassinated, and why that's important, because it would absolutely lay some real culpability at the hands of the New York City Police Department in Malcolm's assassination. We wanted to go back and look at that. Herb Boyd, who gave us the book, gave us two important contributions to the literature of Malcolm recently, the Diary of Malcolm X, right, where he actually him and his sister Ilyas actually took apart Malcolm's legendary diary that he kept with him when he made those important travels abroad, and edited Malcolm X Real Not Invented, one of two book responses of Black scholars to the horrible attack on Malcolm's legacy that Manning Marable did with reinvention, with the life of reinvention, and a brother who I'm deeply fond of. We basically grew up in the struggle around Malcolm together in many real ways. Zak Kondo, right? Conspiracies, unraveling the assassination of Malcolm. As we were proud to host Zak when he was getting that out back in the early '90s, and how Zak had stood up, and some of us had to stand up to some reactionary forces in our community, not wanting to hear what was important about that particular incident that we're still trying to recover from. So I think Zak is, I don't know if Herb has gotten on. Herb hasn't gotten on yet? Okay. Well, hope Herb gets on, because Herb was at the press conference. So I wanted he might have been able to answer some questions that we have about Brother Hassan that are important to this conversation. But I wanted us to have an opportunity to take to reclaim what we know for sure about the assassination. That absolutely includes law enforcement of a number of kinds in Malcolm's assassination that we don't need to argue and speculate about. Right. So Zak, it's good to have you with us, beloved.
How's everybody doing? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, good. Because I've been having some technical problems with some earlier Zoom stuff that don't have nothing to do with Malcolm all day. So I'm actually using my wife's computer for this one, because I didn't want to go through that BS anymore. But it's good to see y'all, and thank you for invite me. Let me say for the record, though, that I've been incognito for the last several months working on, I've been revising my book on the assassination of Malcolm X. And so I've, not been interested in talking, at least publicly, so I can focus my attention on, on my revision. But when my brother calls me, I'm making the exception. So I just want you to know that, Baba, Saeed, that, I'm only here because you called me. Otherwise, I would have said no.
Yeah, we totally get that. And one of the things that I've had to share out with folks, particularly over the last couple of years, because it was a Netflix piece called "Who Killed Malcolm X" that rehashed really a lot of old stuff, right? That we dare say focused on the wrong scholar. Right? And all due respect to my little brother Abdul Rahman Muhammad, somebody I care about a great deal, right? They've just focused on the wrong side. And saying that, being clear that was a commercial venture, and commercial ventures have their ways of doing their things, and we need to be clear on how those things go down when they happen. So we've got a lot in terms of having the real folks to give the real clarity with real depth and with real scholarship, right? Real scholarship. So let's just start with just your own reaction, Baba Zak, to what we saw and heard on Monday with Brother Mustafa's revelation.
Okay, and how you doing today, Brother Edward? I don't think I spoke to you like I should have.
I'm good, brother.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. When I heard the info, the information, a lot of skepticism, speculation. I'm at the stage now where I don't jump every time something comes out the woodwork when it comes to Malcolm's assassination. And, for the obvious reason that sometimes stuff comes out and it's viable, it's real, it's accurate, it's credible. And sometimes stuff come out and it's not. Or sometimes stuff come out and it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So at this stage of the game, to me, this is not a smoking gun in any way, shape, or form, assuming that what the brother said, 58 years later, is accurate. I have a lot of questions to start with. And my first question is, why are we waiting 58 years? Now, when I read when I listened to the news conference and I read some reports on it, it made note of the fact that right after the assassination, he and his family left the country. And, I'm not mad at them for that because, they were scared and, but based on what he, believes that he heard, it makes a lot of sense. I guess the question that I got is that immediately after the assassination, I get it. What I'm not getting is, okay, there should have come a time in which that type of information could have been shared, to the public, particularly when people like myself and people like you and a whole bunch of other people are out there giving lectures, writing books, on television, talking about the assassination. I guess the question that I got is doing that, give them the initial leeway, but then a year later, a year after that, 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, why didn't this brother share what he know? So that's my first thing. And so it forces me to be skeptical from Jump Street. Certainly, I would like to talk to him. Certainly, I would like to get more of an understanding of why you wait, 58 years. I mean, generations before you share, something like that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, assuming that it's accurate, we still don't have a smoking gun, because all that basically says to me, because remember, we know that bossy agents were there. We know that there was at least 3, and there were probably more, but we know that there were at least 3. Why? Because Bossy told us that publicly in articles, in interviews. So even if Hare was an agent, now, if Hare was an agent, then I think we got something there, because, but we know that Hare was not an agent. And so let's say that what the brother said, what he said was true, then all that basically tells us is that there were some white NYPD cops who were aware that there were, an NYPD presence where there was, I guess it would have to be Bossy, because, it would have had to have been undercover. And so all that says to me is that a white NYPD cop is wondering whether or not Boss is a part of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Well,
here's
by
the
the way, it's
problem.
the Bureau of Special Services, the undercover arm of the New York City Police Department. For those who have not heard this language before, go ahead, keep going. Back.
Oh yeah, right. It stands for the Bureau of Special Services and Investigation. It was like their miniature intelligence apparatus for the New York City Police Department. And so my point is this: if the brother heard, if Hassan heard what he said he heard, and and it's true, then all that tells us is that whoever said it, that particular cop, this is what we can run with. All it tells us is that that particular cop was aware that there was a boss or an NYPD presence at the assassination. But beyond that, it really doesn't take us any further than us already knowing that there were boss agents, and we need to make this point, Negro boss agents were there.
Yes.
Okay. So it tells us that. But other than that, it's not a whole lot that we can really run with this. And in fact, in many ways, it reminds me of the Raymond Wood situation.
It's gonna come to that. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's similar to that. It has possibilities, but when you analyze it, it's not really taking us anywhere beyond what Woods, who, and let's be honest about this, Woods had betrayed our people, as a member of boss. So right then and there, we got to be careful with the source. And then he's telling us, he doesn't have a smoking gun. See, it's one thing if Woods is telling us, hey, I was put undercover, and then my job, as they expressed it to me, was to compromise Malcolm's security on the day that he was killed. And that's what I did. And they told me this. Either they told it to me verbally or they put it in writing. And here's the documents if you want to see more. See, if Woods could have given us more than just a traitor's memoirs, who's also dealing with his own demons, because he's a man who betrayed us, with the
part of his memoirs. Yes.
Panthers. He betrayed us, with the what was the other organization? CORE. He betrayed us with CORE.
Came in the CORE in the late 50s. That's right.
Exactly. Stuff. So, this is who we're talking about. So I remember people were jumping up and down when the whole Woods thing happened. And, I remember they had the big press conference, but there's not a whole lot there. When push comes to shove, all this basically telling us is that this traitor, Woods, is telling us what he believed. And unfortunately, serious-minded people need a little bit more than a traitor's assessment, if you will, of his assessment if he couldn't have given us more substantive information from what the white man said to him or what the white man put on paper or some other credible source. We are stuck relying on Woods. And technically, this is where we are right now with this Hassan situation. We're stuck. Give us some more substance. I'm not here to say that what the brother is saying isn't true. But is that all you got for us? We need more than that if we're being serious. So, that's my that's my hesitancy. That's my, I wouldn't say disappointment, but this is what I'm looking for, more substance. And then again, explain so that maybe we can put this in some context, why this takes 58 years for you to publicly, share this. And then another question that I would have, and maybe Herb can answer this, would be, were there other people that he shared this with, like right afterwards?
Right.
Because that's significant, when you got 3 and 4 and 5 people who he was sharing that with, even, even if he wasn't sharing it publicly, then that gives us some more to kind of work with as well. But right now, for somebody like me, this is nothing to write home to Ma and Pa about.
Mm-hmm. Herb can, he's trying to get in. I don't know, he's off camera. Herb, Can you hear us?
I'm having trouble with the camera thing, but I'm listening.
Okay, but you hear us good. We hear you good. Well, why don't you? I want you to share your own observations about the press conference, the recent developments, right? Whether or not you got a chance to talk to Brother Mustafa Hassan at the press conference, right? What can you share with us based on your own observations, sir?
I think what Zak is absolutely on point, because all of the concerns, and it raises so many more questions than answers. It was like, what is this press conference all about? And as Zak started off with, anything to do with Malcolm is certainly going to grab the headlines. Now you got this attorney Crump, and they have the lawsuits. The family has filed these lawsuits. So anything that pops up there becomes possible ammunition for the lawsuit. That's the first thing you have to understand exactly. What's the excitement? They make a whole lot of excitement about something, which of course, in a Shakespearean sense, has much to do about nothing. Because here you have someone, and we pressed him, Zak, on this at the press conference. There was four concerns that I had, two that other reporters had, that particularly the New York One reporter. He was persistent in trying to find out, first of all, what did you hear this police officer said when it was outside apprehending Thomas Hayer, right? He says that, and there's confusion even on that as you go from one report to another. Some said that, is he one of us? Another said, is he one of ours? So you have some confusion right away. And he said it himself, he vacillated on that himself. We pressed him on it, trying to get some clarity on that, exactly the circumstances under which it was done. One of the things that stood out at the press conference was all of the still photos based upon, and again, it's not clear. They only saw the video 2 days before. And understand this too, Zayed, that the deposition only was taken on back less than a month ago. Matter of fact, on July the 6th. Yeah. That's when they took the deposition. So we say, wait a minute, and the footage that they got, I asked them, was there more footage? And they kind of like, they couldn't go there with that. So you have the footage. Of course, you're talking about the eyewitness, another eyewitness. I've interviewed at least 4 people, just like Hassan, who were not subpoenaed, who were not called to jury, who were not witnesses in any of this, was not a part of the trial, including Baba Herman Ferguson.
We'll come to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's a very critical thing about what Herman experienced there coincides with the footage, the film footage that they have, and not enough about inside or outside. This is a short segment, and because what Herman told me is that he saw a flash at the time all of this was going on, indicate that the cameras there had some lighting equipment to confiscate and capture that particular moment. So it boils down to, and I think Zak is certainly on point, talking about, like, first of all, who is this guy? Why it took him so long to come out? It was 2 or 3 of us asked him about that. But Attorney Crump made sure that we could not get a one-on-one with him. He kept his client, as such, away from the media, away from the press. And what he had to say there was very, very, and they took him a long time, like 45 minutes to an hour before we even got the press conference started, because they kept going into like mini conferences among themselves. to make sure they were on the same page and what had to be said. And so they had kind of a controlled situation there with this with Hassan. And he was not too certain about this thing. His eyes was darting all over the place, looking at. I guess he said, "Who's here? Who are these people?"
Hmm.
It was only one or two people there could have really contextualized that moment historically. Ilyasa to some extent, of course, she was just a baby at that time. But I was the oldest person there, the only one who could kind of maybe go all the way back. So he kept eyeing me. I wanted to get the chance to talk to him one on one without all of the kind of cautions and control that the attorneys have on him because they don't want to violate anything to do with the lawsuit they have. So you raised a number of questions about a press conference that could not be answered or was not answered. And they were posed by at least three or four of us out there, journalists who was working, trying to get a little bit more information. Even when they were showing all of the photos, and these photos, we've seen them again and again. There was nothing new about that. The only revelation came was that, oh, I'm this person, I'm that person. So it was like four big blow ups, but opposed in which he identified himself, even on stage. But when I asked him after they showed the film footage, I say, "Can you confirm the fact that the man with the beard is in fact Gene Roberts?" The attorney jumped in there and said, "We can't talk about that. We can talk about that." He cut me off. I said, "Where are the film footage showing Yuri Kochiyama, who has Malcolm's head in her lap?" He cut me off at that point. So the two things I had, and of course, Gene Roberts, when you talk about an undercover cop, I interviewed him, took him to the Audubon Ballroom, along with the photographer Jules Allen, and we had him go through the whole thing. And at that time, one of the things he told me that was absolutely revelatory was that, I asked him about police involvement, possible complicit in the assassination. He was saying, "Hey, why should we kill the goose who's laying the golden eggs?" I mean, they'd already infiltrated. They knew everything that Malcolm was doing. So they didn't want to, hey, we've tried anything. We've tried to protect him, keep him here a little bit longer and get more information. But otherwise, you have five undercover cops, as we know of, and none of them knew each other. So let me stop at this point because there's so much out here we need to talk about, and maybe one point at a time. And Zach can amplify, particularly. I sent you earlier, Zach, the stuff I've been working on with Don Rojas on the role of the CIA, which is another thing we
Yes.
to really get into because when you start about new investigations, you're going to have to give us a lot more substance, a lot more information that the CIA captured abroad when Malcolm is traveling on those two trips to Africa and the Middle East.
And of course, when he faced that poisoning in Cairo back in August of '64 on that trip too, that didn't come out of the sky, right? Let me shift it this way. I wanted to, and I don't know what, and his role seemed to be somewhat limited, right? But it's a local piece, right? One of the lawyers is Ray Hamlin, a young man who's been a part of the handful of Black lawyers that we can call on for certain kind of things in this community. And I wanted to lift him up in a positive way because it appears that Mustafa Hassan brought this revelation to him, and then Ray made it move. And I want to. I don't know when we can actually get Ray, but I would love to engage Ray in this platform if we can at some point. And one of the main reasons why we're having this conversation because I want to look at Ray and Crump and let them understand that this suit is serious. We've got experts who've done some real work on this, right? Who can help build this case as opposed to, staying away from us. We don't want them to miss a moment. And I'm saying that for several reasons. Zach, I started, our conversation talking about the commercial intent and limitations of who killed Malcolm X. And of course, they will take credit for the exoneration of the two brothers, Khalil Islam and the other brother for being exonerated, we said, well, hold up. That exoneration does not give the state a pass, because they, given these brothers some restitution some years later. That does not give them a pass, right? And certainly, if they're going to be given some restitution, the Shabazz family has been given nothing but grief, lies, disrespect, and disacknowledgement over decades, and we definitely need to fix that. So I want to, not even though we have critical concerns about how this is playing out in the media from the lawyers, we also want to, recognize the validity of something coming their way in terms of compensation and justice that they're entitled to, and how we can all help that. Right? If we're working together, we can all help that. Right? So I just want to lift that up. But Herb, why don't you spend a minute, because that you and Don have done an article, and I'm gonna pull it in a minute and share it out. But I want you to share what you and Don, and that's Don Rojas, by the way, a survivor of the betrayal and overthrow of the New Jewel movement, who came from revolutionary Grenada, where Malcolm's mother is from, right, and became a part of our movement as a radical journalist, and is still very much with us. Right? Why don't you share some of what you and Don have been looking at in terms of that, and we'll continue this conversation.
One of the things that, in fact, I just got an email from Don earlier today, and it's a brilliant piece. What he's talking about Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and they're having a big celebration. They're calling it Remembrance Reunion. Reverend Daughtry over at House of the Lord Church in Brooklyn. It's going to be a march, and then they're going to have a big conference and a lot of reflections on Kwame Ture's life. So Don sent me the piece that he did, and it's a brilliant piece of journalism. Of course, has been an outstanding journalist over the years, and we've been hooked up. He's like my brother in so many ways. We've worked together I met him at the Amsterdam News back in the kind of the early 90s when he arrived, because he'd been bouncing around the country, going to, oh my goodness, after the assassination with Maurice. And that was very traumatic in his life. And
God,
he,
yes.
he hasn't even been able to write about it. I remember on one, we was on a cruise ship, Royal Caribbean, going down to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Haitian Revolution. He was my bunkmate. He kept me up all night talking about what happened. He recounted that whole moment of what happened with him and his family after the assassination of Maurice Bishop, and how the Russian embassy saved them.
Yeah. Yeah. So about what has you? I mean, what have you uncovered? What do you want to share with us about the CIA and Malcolm? Herbert, did we lose him?
Yeah, I think we did.
Okay. I think I'm trying to post that up, right? He's trying to get back in. Yeah, he's also shifting from a show that he does with Gary Bird on BAI. So all our hands are quite full, and I just lifted that up for our page so folks can look at that article, right? But I'm saying that to say, as he was trying to get back on it, we're coming from some real spaces in this thing. We're not coming from armchair places, right? Herman, we mentioned Herman a minute ago. Herman eyewitness Ray Wood, the same Ray Wood that Zach was just talking about. Ray Wood being taken care of at the scene by the New York City police, and that Ray Wood may have even been wounded, right, at the scene. And Malcolm was a public figure. Press was certainly there. Who was, in terms of press, who was taking pictures, film footage, etc.? There's probably a lot more that's just sitting in in certain prominent places that should have been lifted up a long time ago. I want to lift up another brother too, who was an unsung hero. There's that footage that was looked at. A brother named Omar Shabazz. Omar was a founding member of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee with us, right? I lifted up this footage a long time ago that not just shows that aftermath, but also shows another brother from Newark who broke my heart when I found out who the hell he was. Brother Mustafa, the shotgunner, feigning like he was, a part of the people who just unceremoniously just walked away. And all of them came back to the mosque that night and basically reported in what they did. It's so much to uncover. Zach, why don't you just jump in and based on what we were just talking about as Herb tries to come on in.
Yeah. The Malcolm's assassination is it's a travesty, but it also has so many moving parts, so many complexities. And I know that, for me, I've been studying his assassination since 1981. It gets so entrenched sometimes, that you just got to walk away from it. I think one of the takeaways for me, as somebody who really has studied Malcolm, is that Malcolm, we did a very poor job protecting Malcolm.
Make it plain.
I think that if we've learned anything from his assassination, it should be that we can't play games when we have brothers and sisters like him. We can't be the armchair security. We can't be the show security, because what Malcolm had at the Audubon on February 21st, 1965, he had show security. It might as well have been, some type of play, on stage, because what he needed was serious-minded brothers who understood security, understood the importance of protecting people being secured, and also people who could protect the topic, who could protect the subject in this case. And Malcolm didn't have none of that, and in fact, let's be honest, other than Reuben,
right,
who pulled out his piece and went after the people who he thought were responsible for Malcolm, in the end, and I talk about this in my, in the first edition of my book, in the end, Malcolm had amateurs. And those amateurs, for the most part, made him a sitting duck, made him an easy target for those Mosque 25 men, who were basically there to slaughter Malcolm. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did to Malcolm X. Malcolm X was slaughtered. We use euphemisms like assassinated or killed or murdered. But when you really get down to it, what those men did from March 25 on February 21st, 1965, what they did was they slaughtered a man in full view of his wife,
his children,
and his 4 daughters, in full view of people off the streets who were there to basically, hear what this man had to say. That was a slaughter. And I think that at this stage of the game, we need to be able to speak bluntly about that. Those men who fired those bullets in that man, they had no concern whatsoever for the fact that this was an African man who was doing the work of our people. They didn't care about, none of that stuff mattered. All those 5 men cared about, and let's keep this honest, all they cared about was they were under orders by their superiors at the mosque, but also in Chicago, to make an example of Malcolm X. And that's what Mosque number 25, the killers from Mosque 25, that's what they did. Now, obviously, this isn't the whole story. I spend chapters in my book talked about the role that the FBI played in exploiting differences and problems and inflaming tension and conflicts and all of that. But in the end, this couldn't have happened without the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad doing what they did. And I think that one of the things that's bothered me over the last, damn near 60 years is how we have given, in this whole Malcolm thing, we've given the Nation of Islam a free pass in all of this for a very long time. Yeah, we can talk about the NYPD. Yeah, we can talk about the FBI. Yeah, we can talk about the CIA. But at what stage do we seriously talk about the nation in all of this? And I think that's what's bothered me over the years. And then we get Farrakhan, who can go back and forth. Yes, we, on one stage, he's bragging about killing him. On another stage, we didn't do nothing. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us not to touch him, so we didn't touch him. At another stage, they were all agents. At another stage, in other words, none of this has helped us to understand what happened to Malcolm X. And after almost 6 decades, we need to know, our people need to know what happened to Malcolm X without the fluff, without the games, without, people trying to give the nation an excuse. We need the truth. So at this stage of the game, we have to start dealing with the serious truth in all of this and not just chase the shiny objects and stuff. The FBI sounds good. Yeah, the CIA sounds good. Yeah, the NYPD, all that sounds good. But at some stage, as African people, we have to look eternally at the role that we played and organizations like the Nation played in Malcolm's assassination. And that's what we have been negligent. That's where we've not been up to par. Why? Because what? We're scared to offend, the nation. Well, hell, we're talking about the old nation. First off, that's another point that needs to be made clear here. What happened in 1965 has nothing to do really with the Nation of Islam today. We're talking about 2 separate organizations. The tragedy is that we have allowed the current Nation of Islam to protect and to rewrite the script for the old Nation of Islam. And at some stage, that has to stop. We need, at this stage of the game, to be able to talk seriously about the mistakes that we made in Malcolm X. And if it means that, that accountability has to be, disseminated, then we do that. But how long are we supposed to be lying and playing games when it comes to the nation and Malcolm's assassination? How much longer are we supposed to play this silly ass game? Yeah. And the problem that I got right now with the whole Trump thing is that, they're talking about the government's role. And I understand that because the government has deep pockets.
That's right.
But are we talking about the money thing or are we talking about the truth when it comes to Malcolm's assassination? My thing is that we should be talking about the truth, not just information that's going to win this lawsuit for the daughters. We should be interested in the whole truth about Malcolm's assassination. And of course, bringing in the nation doesn't help the lawsuit. And therefore, all we're hearing is the FBI and the CIA and the NYPD, but that doesn't take us That's not the whole story. That doesn't solve the assassination of Malcolm X for us. So the lawsuit to me right now is more a distraction than anything else. And those of us who are serious, we must still continue to understand the whole picture of the assassination of Malcolm X, not just the shiny coins.
And that has a legacy that continues beyond Malcolm too, because the COINTELPRO works when there are pre-existing contradictions. And what you're talking about is a pre-existing contradiction that needs to be addressed. The Black Panther Party and the Kawaida movement went through that afterwards, right? And even now, there's still difficulties in having those discussions, because so healing can't take place without full revelation, right? We just lost. And let me bring it to sum up your point in another way, right? We just lost Dr. Mutulu Shakur, right? One of the things that Mutulu was important about that gets missed in his legacy, he was more than Tupac's stepdad, who kept real on the revolution.
Exactly.
But Mutulu, as a young organizer in the late 70s, started talking about, opening these investigations, real analysis, right? Truth and reconciliation, something that will come up later at the end of apartheid. And that's based on folks coming forward with what they did and what genuinely happened, so that redress and healing could take place. Mutulu was talking about that years ago, right? And so that play and few years ago, right? This is a hip hop talk show, by the way, right? And I'm gonna bring it back to hip hop. Remember XXL magazine, right? Mm-hmm. When, in the 90s, when we were dealing with the darkness of the violence on the streets, right? Somebody asked Mumia about how can the Panther example help us, increase peace on the streets. Mumia wrote a searing critique of his comrades and his party by virtue of how they failed to address the mistakes that they were made that turned, weapons, of Africans on each other, as opposed to the state, and said that very critically and very candidly that, his generation could not be an example for that. There's some mistakes that they needed to address. So that's a heavy piece to lift, but it's an important piece if we indeed say we're in pursuit.
Exactly. And if I could chime in real quick, y'all were talking about Kwame Ture a few minutes ago, and I count Kwame Ture as one of my mentors. One of the things that he used to always talk about is he would say it is the responsibility of current generations to study the mistakes of past generations in order to correct those mistakes. And I think one of the things that we haven't done very well in the case of Malcolm X is to have those conversations, have that dialogue, have those discussions, so that we can be honest and talk about the whole, a holistic understanding of Malcolm's assassination, which means what? We got to bring in the Nation of Islam in all of this, not just the FBI, not just the NYPD, not just the CIA. And I think that's something that we really need to do.
Herb, are you there? Can you hear us now? He's still struggling. I'm gonna make it another local dip, right? Ed, do you remember Baba Amanifa Williams?
I do.
Right? Baba Amanifa was in the nation during that time, right? And just as we lift up J. Edgar Hoover's Do Something About Malcolm X, there's Elijah Jr. coming to New York, saying, let's when we're gonna take the nigger's tongue and put it in an envelope and bring it back to Chicago. That's when he left the nation, right? And went to the West Coast, actually wound up in the Kawaida movement. When stuff got crazy with them, he left the left coast and came to us, and came to Amiri, and came to, and actually helped build up African echoes and whatnot. So there's these spaces that we need to be honest about, right? Self-critically, right? If we're going to heal and learn from these mistakes. Albert Newell Washington, who we lost in prison, And I have a comrade who I love and dear, and I cuss out every time his name comes up. His name is Sally O'Brien from WBAI. She's not on WBAI anymore, unfortunately, but who helped really lift up Mumia's voice, in radio land for us over the years. Did an interview with Noah before Noah passed. We lost Noah to cancer back in 2000 in prison, right? Noah was one of the New York Three. And then one of the things that Noah insisted on with the young heads embracing the old heads, don't let them give you the romantics of what we did. Make sure they give you everything, including the mistakes, because it's the only way that we're going to go forward and not repeat those same mistakes.
Right.
Herb, are you there? Oh God, I wanted to really get him in because he's
yeah, because Herb has sent me something today, and I think it's an article, but I couldn't open it. I had to get permission from him, so I hit the button to get permission. You know what? I hate that type of stuff, man. That technology stuff when it comes to stuff like that. So when I get back, once we finish, I'll check. Maybe I got the permission that I needed in order to open it.
Yeah. And we have to have y'all back too, because I'm gonna have to wind down because we got to bring in our last segment. But you're right on point. When can, and we've had this conversation, you and I have, but for the public's benefit, when can we broadly expect the reprint? Because you have since updated.
Right. It's revised, and it's not a reprint. It's a revision, and it's more extensive. I continue to do research, and it's probably 200 pages longer than the other one, and another 1,200 endnotes. So it's very documentative, and I suspect that by November, I think November is realistic right now.
And let me ask you this question. This is something we're moving in on two important milestones to appreciate. One, next year is the end of the decade of peoples of African descent, and I've been trying to do some things, and some of us who work on the Pan-African front and international circles have been lifting up Malcolm and the need for united strategies there very, very vigorously. But also 2 years from now, we're looking at Malcolm's centennial, right?
Right.
And some years ago, back in 1990, 1991, and I have to get him on, Bill Sales, Sam Anderson, and Abdul Al-Kalimat, veteran elder scholars, put together Malcolm X Speaks in the 90s conference to bring together a lot of the good things that were coming out in terms of scholarship on Malcolm. That includes your own work. If you had to say something to young scholars about places that we need to go in studying and capturing Malcolm's legacy in terms of needed scholarship, what would some of those places be?
Wow, that's a hell of a question. I would probably start in Omaha, because I understand that they have commemorated where he was born. So certainly, you would want to go there. Is the Roxbury prison still there?
His cell.
Okay, go ahead.
His cell has been converted into a library within the prison.
Oh, okay. But there's no commemoration there, though, right?
No, yeah, there should be. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how difficult it would be, but even going to the prison, I think, if that could be arranged, knowing the politics and all that, certainly that would be a good place to stop. I tell you, one of the things that I did when I first went to Harlem, when I was in college, is, I looked at the autobiography first, or before I went, and I had certain streets and stuff and that I wanted to go down that he mentioned in the autobiography, so that so it was, it seems kind of strange to think about it right now, but that was a big thing for me, because it was like I'm walking the path that Malcolm X once was. So I would recommend, at least visiting Harlem, Hotel Thressa, if it's, what's there, certainly, visit places like that. The East Amherst House, I know it's still there. Well, I'm assuming it's still there. I haven't.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a good place to start. In other words, I'm looking at your question from the standpoint of, of just paying tribute more than like research. This is about tribute, just visiting historical sites that should be important to us as African people in relation to Malcolm X.
Herb used to actually do a tour of the city, doing the very thing you used to talk about.
You're right.
You actually do that.
And,
right?
and certainly stuff like that is important.
Yes.
And then in places like Detroit, what used to be the King Solomon Baptist Church, I guess it's the Shrine now. Mm-hmm. But places like that, would be important as a tribute to Malcolm. Now, of course, you're talking about research, we're talking about something different.
Yeah, research. That's where I was going. But Yeah. Now,
if you're talking about research, then certainly read all of the literature that's been published on Malcolm. His FBI files, a lot of it is now online. Certainly, you want to go through some of that. Certainly some of that as well, as far as the research is concerned. And of course, anything that Malcolm wrote, any of his speeches that still, that we can listen to. Certainly, we want to listen to his speeches. I never heard Malcolm's voice. I read the autobiography when I was 12. I didn't hear his voice until I was 18. Young people today, they don't have to go through those types of obstacles and stuff. So certainly you want to listen to the man himself, but you also want to read stuff that he wrote as well. Just to get things started.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Zach, I was wondering if I could ask you a question, because I think that, one of the pieces you were lifting up, in terms of going back and taking a look at the Nation of Islam in 1965. The question is who would we talk to that would really have that kind of information that was really on the inside, other than a Minister Farrakhan? And I say that because if we're talking about the nation then, and we talk about the nation in 2023, even if there's no way to do that, right, without implicating the totality of the nation, because you would hurt the brand, right? Because because it becomes a brand issue. So there's no way to separate 65 because the man who leads the Nation of Islam today was right there in 65, and he was the assistant minister to Malcolm, and he was also under the guides of the same man that was teaching Malcolm, but Elijah Muhammad.
Yeah, Baba, you raise a very important question. This is the way that I would respond to it, though. There's still a school of, a class of old line, hardcore former nation members out there today who basically take issue with the current Nation of Islam. They take the position that Farrakhan, did not have a right to try to resurrect the old nation, that Farrakhan, should not have been the person who should have become the heir apparent to the, to the old nation. And they basically, you hear them periodically, they come through here, here and there. These are old line, hardcore Elijah Muhammad Muslims who think that what's happening right now is not real when it comes to the Nation of Islam. And so my response to you is that we should be reminded that there are other threads to this whole old nation versus new nation, old nation versus new nation, and that there is no continuity. Yes, you can connect dots, but what Louis Farrakhan created, even though it was based on the model of Elijah Muhammad, it's not what Elijah Muhammad created. And he, in many ways now, I tell people this. I'm waiting right now for Farrakhan, and we've been seeing signs. He's getting close to deifying himself, in the same way that Elijah Muhammad deified himself, as the messenger. I don't know what Farrakhan will be, but it's getting more and more. And my wife and I were recently looking at what was that, baby? Yeah, it was, but it was like, was it the final call? I think it was something on the final call, but it was a photograph, and it had Farad Muhammad, it had Farrakhan, and it had Elijah Muhammad. Farrakhan was in the middle, and his picture was larger than the other two. Now, for most people, that's not significant. But for somebody like me who's been studying this thing for 40, 50 years, that's sending a very strong message as far as where, Farrakhan's 90 years old now. It's sending a strong message as to, as he begins his transition, whether or not he's going to declare himself something more than than just an honorable servant of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So my thing right now is that it's important to make the separation between the old Nation of Islam and the new Nation of Islam.
So we're talking about we're talking about those older Muslims that are out there who may have issues currently with the nation that has been rebuilt by Farrakhan. You're saying those are the people that we should go and have conversations with in order to find out what really happened in 65 with that, if you will, that particular version of the nation in 65 versus this version of the nation of 2023.
Yeah,
but not talk to Farrakhan at all about it.
No. Farrakhan needs to be talked to as well. I tried to interview Farrakhan when I was writing my first iteration of my book, and they never really responded and all that stuff. But no, what you're raising is a very important question. Here's the problem with it, though. The problem is that even when we do bring out the old guard, because I've met some of these people who, they don't,
right in Newark.
Don't talk to them about Farrakhan. They don't want to hear that. They think he's an imposter and he's exploited, what the messenger built and all of that. The problem with them, though, is that because they're still so much into Elijah Muhammad, that they're not gonna, and this has just been my experience, they're not gonna necessarily come clean when it comes to Elijah Muhammad and the nation either. Right? That's the problem.
Some of them still have those same old hard feelings towards Malcolm from back then. That's right.
Exactly. And they may or may not talk about the assassination on that level. And that's the problem. So you raise again, brother Edward, a very important question, but it's no simple answer to it.
Yeah, the reason I say that, Brother Zach, for two reasons. One is that I joined the Nation of Islam at Mosque number 25 in 1973.
Okay.
And so a lot of those people that you're talking about, and Zaid can attest to this as well, were our lieutenants and our captains, right? And some of those brothers are around now. They're in the 80s, right? They are around, and yeah, they do have some very strong feelings about Minister Farrakhan because they know him personally and they know him on a different level,
right?
But for me, I think that I would think it would be difficult, right? Because once they have that conversation, remember the Nation of Islam is a brand, right? If you able to really get those brothers to have that conversation, because when you say Mosque 25 still exists today, right? So when you say Mosque 25 and then somebody puts out what happened in 1965, I think that if there's another version of what is out there comes out, I think that it would hurt the brand in and of itself, because people because I think that people who, right or wrong, right, have some feelings about Malcolm today, right? Like for instance, I don't think that there's no one who knows the story can actually say that the Nation of Islam did not have a direct, because even Farrakhan. Do you remember when he was at the at the at the the Apollo Theater, and he was there with Betty Shabazz on stage with Percy Sutton and all of them? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it.
And remember, one of the things you alluded to earlier, where he was having a conversation and he used the term he contributed to the climate, but that he said he had nothing to do with it, right? Now, that's him saying that. But I get it that we're talking to some of the brothers who were actually there and sisters who were actually there in 65 to get their version, or even to talk with people who may have known what actually happened in the Audubon in 1965. The problem I think we would have is, and I keep coming back to this, Brother Zach, would be the brand, right? Because I think that there's no way to even talk, because even if you talk to Zaid and I as former FOI, right? We whether 65 was 2023, we will always be soldiers, whether it is what it is. And even if you talk to Conrad, right? There's no way to remove Conrad, even though he's Reverend Conrad Tillett. There's no way to remove him from history, because there's always going to be three main ministers of Mosque Number 7 who did tremendous work, right? Malcolm, Farrakhan, and Conrad, right? So it becomes the brand. So that's what I'm saying, Zach. I hear you. That I would love to hear conversation from them brothers in 65. Could you imagine that if we were able to get that without them giving us emotional feeling, but giving us facts? Oh my God.
Yeah. Quick question though, brother. You said you joined in 73?
73.
Okay. Was Captain John Nash then? Was he there then?
No, he wasn't there.
He'd already left?
Yeah, he wasn't my captain. I know Minister James Shabazz was my minister. Junior was my minister, because his father was killed, as you know.
So in 73.
Yeah, right. September, in fact. Okay, because I've been trying to see if I could get some information on John Nash.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know Frederica's husband and brother-in-law, but they were my lieutenants back in the day, right? Okay. When I was coming up. So she's still around, right?
Yeah, late too. Yeah.
Yeah. She's still around. She has a lot of information, about March 25 at that particular time and what was going on. So when and there's another brother named Alif that's still around in the city of Newark. There's some cats that are here, who were around, because, as I say, I was a junior FY. I was young, right. But I remember all of that. And, when you coming in 74, you coming in after the aftermath of the assassination of Malcolm X. But the nation, and Zaid, this, the nation was big in the city of Newark, brother. I mean, there's nowhere you could go.
For Newark being the biggest NOI city in the NOI's history, absolutely.
There was nowhere that you could go, Brother Zach, in the city of Newark, and you didn't encounter a Muslim, a black Muslim. I'm not talking about Sunnis. I'm talking about Muslims, right? That's how strong it was. We were even stronger, even though New York had Farrakhan. New York, whenever Newark would go to New York, we were just that strong. Yeah. Right? And Zaid would tell you himself.
And the spread of the nation through Jersey going south, all that comes right out of Newark. Newark was the nucleus for all of that.
Because even when you went to Philadelphia, right? I remember we would go to Philadelphia.
I'm sorry, yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it was just that level of so it's interesting that you say that, but man, it would be amazing if somebody could really put, because them brothers who are still alive, I'm sure,
Some
Them
of them.
brothers are out there. They just never said anything. And I don't know if it's because they protecting the brand. I don't really know. But you know, I would think, Zaid, you correct me if I'm wrong. I would think a good place to start would be Frederica.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's got feelings on that. Everybody's got feelings, and we need to start watching our time too. This is a heavy discussion.
Yeah.
I appreciate you big time. You know that, beloved, right? Our sister just got on, and she I guess she walking to this heavy conversation like, wow, right? Donna Cat.
Well, I blame hey, Donna tonight. I blame Zach. I blame Saeed, and I blame her.
I will take full responsibility for that. And I'm sorry we lost her because Herb has so much to contribute. And you know, and Herb in his 80s now, right? And if I get to my 80s, I want to be just like him, right?
Yeah, one of our giants.
It's still contributing. It's still contributing. Was right there, you know. There's been and a hugely important resource for us. And we don't have Rhino tonight. I thought we were going to have Rhino come on.
I thought so too.
He does too. But I know we're getting ready to wind up. So Zach, I want to appreciate you. Donna, give you the honor of.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I'm glad that y'all got to have a long conversation about Malcolm X being back in the news, because that was one of the things. I'm sad that I didn't get to join it, but I'm glad that y'all were having an extensive conversation, because it's a conversation that need to be had. And one of the things that you did say, Ed, about where you can start, but I know that even in the piece that you got to participate in on Netflix a couple of years ago, Zaid, is probably one of the first documentaries that they started mentioning Newark, if I'm wrong. But now Newark comes into everything, everything that comes out. Just even watching The Godfathers of Harlem, a drama, they said the Muslims from Newark. So now it's something that people are talking about more and more as a part of history.
Just quickly on the question of film, right? I'm trying to put together a Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival inspired by the documentary work that Gil Noble did, right? Because there's a lot of good documentary footage on Malcolm's life that, totally has been nixed, right? With the Netflix action, all due respect to that, right? And that needs to be lifted up. But Don, I wanted you to have the honor of giving Zach the ritual question so we can wind up, because we at the end of the rainbow.
So Baba Zach, thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't get to join, so you're going to have to come back so I can be a part of the conversation with you. With that being said, this is a political hip-hop show. So when you're out doing the work, talking to people, what are some of the hip-hop songs that you listen to, individual or group, that inspire you?
Well, I guess my favorite, all-time hip-hop, and my wife always reminds me, now this is what she says. She says that I slept during the 90s. Okay. But who but who I've always
we woke up deadly.
and I hope that they get back together. Arrested Development. I could, when I got lectures and stuff like that, there are certain groups that I listen to before I speak, and Arrested Development is one. Coltrane's A Love Supreme is another one. Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone is another one. Gil Scott-Heron. So I kind of have my own list of people. Some hip hop, some some R&B. But Arrested Development would be my hip hop.
Arrested Development was a resource and helped us. Some of them even came to New York and participated in some of the early works of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. We're now in our 30th anniversary year. We're trying to do something in November to lift up our anniversary and tribute to Baba Herman and Herman Ferguson and Yalu Ferguson. Let's wrap up with that. Yeah. I ain't even gonna make no announcements there, because we definitely push the time to the limit. Right.
So we're at 9:05. We just lost Tony Bennett and Sinead O'Connor, and I know Sinead O'Connor on a mental health. Artists, music, something that does something to me. And Sinead O'Connor actually suffered with mental health, and her music was so deep. So just thinking, and they said Tony Bennett, you can go anywhere, and I remember him being a part of the civil rights. So just thinking of them and their families. And one more last thing about Tony Bennett. He did a whole show, 70 minutes, with full-blown Alzheimer's.
Wow.
He sure did.
Well, listen, we've come to the end of another show. As
Loaded show, very loaded show.
He talks about, you've heard the drum tonight. We hope that you got, the information that you need to get you through the next week until we come back again. But we want to definitely thank our sister for coming through tonight. We thank Fayemi Shakur.
Very proud of Fayemi.
Doing some incredible work in the city of Newark around, the arts and culture. So we thank that sister for coming on. And Zaid, you can thank all the other folks who came through tonight.
Brother Ike, my buddy, Ike Nahem. We're going to be at the Shabbat Center tomorrow night at 7:00, lifting up the 70th anniversary Cuban Revolution. And of course, my brother right here. We've got some stories we didn't even tell.
Yeah, we go back a ways, don't we? We go back a ways.
and you get the shout out from our beloved Principal Baruti Kafele, who's
from Puerto Rico.
From Puerto Rico. We see you, beloved. We appreciate that. So that's
and let's not forget Rountree for holding up the disciples tonight for her, her comrades who obviously couldn't
healing thoughts to our brother Pastor Bryant Ali.
Yeah,
right. 1/3 of the disciples, and we were looking forward to our little brother Abdul Haqq Muhammad. He's a sharp young brother who's in the nation right now in the Newark, and it's going to be very important to us on the streets out here, the way we need the nation. right.
And Baba Zak, when I came on, I thought you was the rapper. I can't even think of his name. See, they don't even want me to say it. I thought you was Big Daddy Kane. Yeah. I was like, we got Big Daddy Kane on tonight.
So we want to thank y'all. We'll see y'all next time. We'll see y'all next week right here on All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. As Zaid say, we'll see y'all where, Zaid?
Whirlwind.
And Lincoln Park Fest. Did y'all talk about Lincoln?